This is World Wrestling Federation Superstar Duke the Dumpster Droese doing a career interview on Hannibal TV.
We are with former WWE Superstar Duke the Dumpster Droese, who also competed for WCW, as we found out in recent weeks. And he's kind of disappeared off the surface of the earth for a while, but he's resurfaced, and we're going to find out all about that in this interview. But thank you for joining us here in Tennessee, where I guess you live now.
I do, absolutely, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
To start this off, could you just tell us a bit about what your childhood was like?
Childhood, man, I was a kid that grew up with what they now call ADHD. I was a hyperactive kid. That's what they called it. Well, they called me a pain in the ass. Hyperactive kid that made teachers' lives miserable, and but because of that, I was always kind of different than other kids. I was always the clown. I always wanted to be the funny one, so growing up, I goofed off a lot, but I did get into sports. I started playing sports as I grew up, Little League, baseball, football, and of course later on I got into wrestling in high school, things like that. But aside from the childhood where I had the hyperactivity and all that going on, it was pretty normal. Of course, that was back in the days when they could ask you to leave public schools, and at one point I did, and my parents had to put me in private school because I was a little bit too wild for the teachers in public schools. But aside from that, it was a pretty normal childhood.
You're a pretty huge guy. Did you play football or anything?
I played a little bit of high school football. I didn't really like it very much. Then I got into wrestling. The wrestling coach, one year, I ended up in his class. He was the geometry teacher, and I was horrible at math. So he just kind of asked me if I wanted to go out for the wrestling team. This was 11th grade, and I did. And miraculously, my grades in geometry got a lot better. But that first year I didn't do too well in wrestling, and then the 12th grade, it just complete turnaround. I figured it out, and I ended up qualifying for the state tournament and stuff like that. So,
were you a fan of pro wrestling at all growing up?
Absolutely, absolutely. I loved professional wrestling. The show that made me want to become a professional wrestler was WrestleMania 1. The first WrestleMania, that was when I knew that professional wrestling was what I wanted to do. My dad took me to watch it on a closed circuit television at an arena down in Miami, Florida, because they didn't have pay-per-view or none of that stuff back then. You had to go to an arena and watch it on a big screen. And just the whole build-up with Hogan and Mr. T and Piper and Orndorff, that whole thing just hooked me. And that's when I decided I wanted to do that.
Did you know about Florida Championship Wrestling?
I loved watching Championship Wrestling from Florida and that show down there, and because I grew up down in Miami, Florida. I used to watch that all the time, back with Mike Graham, Kevin Sullivan, Blackjack Mulligan. Of course, Barry Windham came along, and Lex Luger came along later. But yeah, I used to watch it all those years growing up.
How did you get into training for pro wrestling?
Interestingly, when after I decided that's what I wanted to do, at that time I was still in high school, and I was on the wrestling team. And apparently what they would do each year on the wrestling team is, as a fundraiser, they would bring in the wrestling, which at that time was Championship Wrestling from Florida, and they would bring it in and they would do a show in the school gym as a fundraiser for the wrestling team. So when they came and did a fundraiser for us, for the wrestling team, we got to work at the security. We got to walk the guys to the ring, and this is when Barry Windham was there. I think Kendall Windham was there. Lex Luger was there. A lot of those guys. But my dad, who was also there, kind of started bugging the wrestlers in the back and asking about where somebody could learn how to become a professional wrestler. And one of the guys on the show that night was a guy by the name of Tyree Pride, the Haitian sensation. And he apparently had maybe a partnership or something with someone locally, a guy who went by the wrestling name of Bobby Wales, the Jamaican Jammer Bobby Wales. And he was running a school, well, it was basically a ring in a warehouse, and had a handful of guys that would show up for practices. So Bobby Wales is the one that trained me. He also trained Norman Smiley. He was Black Magic back then, but he used to come to the practices as well.
Any memories of your first match?
Yeah, I remember it well because I wrestled, I can't remember, I think I was the surfer boy Harry Race, the nephew of Harley Race, which he didn't know anything about it, but...
That was your gimmick?
I think. It was either that or Mean Mike Casey.
Okay.
And it was for the AWA when the Savoldis took over.
Yeah.
When it was ICW.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the guy's full name, but his name was Teddy something, and he was a local guy that knew Tyree Pride. And Tyree Pride set it up. But I went and wrestled. That was my first match. And I'll never forget that me and this guy, Teddy, I believe that was his name, we were standing out in the back where the dressing rooms were at the Davie Rodeo Arena, I believe it was. And we were kind of just going over our match. And there was a bunch of fans out in the back area past the fence where they could kind of see us talking. And Nick Bockwinkel came out and kind of blasted both of us for talking over our match where the fans could see us. But yeah, that was an interesting first match for sure.
A lot of people, including me, always thought that the WWE gave you the garbage man gimmick, but I read through your post that was something you came up with. At what point did you come up with that gimmick?
At one point, I went to college at the University of Miami, and I joined a fraternity. So one of my fraternity brothers kind of gave me this name, and it was a really cool name, Rocco Gibraltar. That was the name. And obviously named after the Rock of Gibraltar. And I was always trying to think of a gimmick that would go along with that name, and I came up with the G-Man, Rocco Gibraltar. And I was trying to figure out what that was going to be. It was either going to be the G-Man as the garbage man or the G-Man as like a federal agent kind of G-Man. And I ended up going with the garbage man gimmick. So I became the garbage man, Rocco Gibraltar, down in Miami, Florida, and was working the few independents that were down there then.
And I've actually watched the video you posted on Facebook that you sent to WWE. You didn't send it in, but you want to tell us the whole story about the video. And I just have to say, I didn't expect much from the video, but that was pretty good. I could see why they hired you because the playing to the crowd was definitely there, where someone that hasn't been wrestling that long doesn't normally have those mannerisms to get the crowd into it.
Yeah, when I was wrestling down in Florida, one thing I was very cognizant of was the need to tape everything I did. Every promo, every match, and so I did that. I taped every match I had wrestling as the garbage man. And what I had decided was, when I finished college, I graduated from the University of Miami in 1993. And at that moment, I decided what my plan was to create a promotional package, to put together a promo tape and a resume and pictures, 8x9s, and just fill up the trunk of my car with them and drive the country, going to different territories, because there was still a few territories then. Driving to different territories and just try to get a job. So, me and my brother decided we were going to make this promo tape. So I took and this is all VHS tapes. It was still there was no DVDs then or none of that stuff. And we took, I had stacks and stacks of VHS tapes of the garbage man Rocco Gibraltar wrestling down in Florida. And what I did is I meticulously took every single VHS tape and put them in the VCR one at a time and watched the entire tape. And every time I saw a move or something I wanted to use, I looked at the little counter number where it was and I wrote it down. And I had this huge list of moves and everything. I would write the counter number and what it was. And I had this long list of all these things I potentially wanted to use on the tape. Then what I did is I went back through and looked at this list, and I created a script for a highlight reel. And I took all the numbers of the things that I wanted to use, and I put them in a certain order that I thought made a little bit of sense. And then I went through and took each and every one of those tapes again in one VCR and put it in and fast forwarded to that counter number and had another tape and another VCR and would just tape that little 5-second blip of whatever that move was. And I went through and did every single move that way. 2 VCRs. So then I put it all together and we looked at it. It looked pretty good as a highlight reel. And my brother, who was a musician, he had an 8-track recorder where he could lay over different things. And he laid over a garbage truck noise at one point, a crowd cheering, that noise, that effect. And then the last thing he put over it was this song by a rapper, Kool Mo D, called I Go to Work. And he laid that over this highlight reel. And by complete dumb luck, a lot of the points lined up with the music where I was doing moves. And it was crazy the way it happened, because we didn't have editing software and computers, or none of that stuff. It was 2 VCRs, an 8-track recorder, and a paper and pencil. That's how we did it. And so I did that. I did a match at the end. I did a promo at the beginning, an interview, and it came out pretty good. And I made probably 20 or 30 copies of that. And I made promotional packages with my resume and pictures, and I was getting ready to go. And right before I was preparing to leave to start driving all over the country, I was reading the newspaper in Miami. The Miami Herald was talking about the NATP convention, which is a convention of television executives that was in the Miami Beach Convention Center that week. And it was talking about the steroid scandal with Hulk Hogan and how Hulk Hogan was jumping to WCW, and they were talking about the scandal and all these different things, and they were asking him questions. But then one last little line, it said, Vince McMahon, who is also at the convention, had no comment. And that's when I realized he was there in Miami at a convention. So the last thing I did, at that time I was working at a beach club as like a night watchman, and a lot of people that owned homes in this area that were members of that beach club were pretty well to do, had money, and one of them was a television executive for a local channel, Channel 2, and he had credentials to get into this convention. So we got in touch with him and he gave me his credentials. I put on a suit and I crashed it. I just walked right in like I was a TV executive and walked right up to Vince McMahon while he was still drinking his coffee and pitched him real quick. I'm Mike Droese. I live here in Miami, Florida, yada, yada, yada. And I'd like to give you at this time this promotional package. And they called me a week later. J.J. Dillon called me a week later to bring me up for a trial.
Wow. That is a very intelligent way of going about getting hired, particularly in those days. So can you tell us about your tryout?
They flew me up, I can't remember if it was like Scranton, Pennsylvania or something, that loop, maybe Bethlehem and in that area. And I did two tryout matches. They had Monday Night Raw and they brought me up the next night for the 2 days of the other TV tapings like Superstars and stuff. And I had dark matches. And I wrestled Reno Riggins, an awesome wrestler. And it's funny because before I came up for the tryout, I remember I was practicing in the backyard. This guy had a ring and we were talking and all the people were there, and you know, there was a buzz because I had a tryout. And this one guy, his name was, he wrestled as Bobby Rogers, and he told me, I'll never forget it, the one piece of advice he gave me, and I've given this to other people and it still rings true, is during your tryout, a lot of times with people, what they'll do is they'll test your attitude. And the way that they'll do it is, the first night they'll tell you, okay, you're going on early, So get your match ready and all these things that you're supposed to do. And you put the match together, and they put you out there early, and you do your match, and however it goes. But then the next night, they tell you again, we're going to put you out early, and then they make you sit for a long time. So this guy, Bobby Rogers, said, listen, they're probably going to make you sit to check your attitude. So just be patient the second night. And it seems like a little thing, but it was a huge thing. Because I don't know how I would have reacted if I didn't know that.
Right. And they have stooges, too, that pay attention to that type of stuff.
Absolutely. You know they were watching. So I just sat there having, a conversation with anybody that came by. I had a good attitude about it, and it all worked out.
Interesting. So how did you find out you were getting hired?
J.J. Dillon called me shortly thereafter and said they liked what they saw, and all the other boys seemed to like me. And at that time, they wanted to offer me a contract, which I'll tell you about, I'm sure, in a minute. You've probably heard about it. But he told me just to kind of wait, and they would let me know when they would be sending me the contract and all that. But basically what it turned out to be was a contract that only guaranteed 10 shots a year at $150 a shot in the World Wrestling Federation. That's what the guarantee was. And they said, of course you're going to make more than that and work more than that, but it's a chance. Which, in my position, I was like, there was no way in hell otherwise I would get up there, so I jumped on it. And apparently a lot of other guys got that same contract during that time.
And you couldn't wrestle for anyone else.
No, you're an independent contractor, but you can't work for anybody else.
So what it is, basically, you're paid according to the house, allegedly, like 25% of the house split amongst the wrestlers according to where you are on the card. So if your expenses don't meet your payoff on a certain night, you actually can go into the red, I guess.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's always funny that sometimes people will ask that question, how much money did you make? Because they think just because you were in the World Wrestling Federation, you made a lot of money. The reality was, during a large part of those mid-90s, mid-1990s, there was not a lot of money being made. And I think I heard maybe Scott Hall say this, and it's very true. Some nights, you had to take your draw, $200 draw. You could get a draw every night in cash for your road expenses. Some nights, you would have to take your draw to make sure you got that much. And I learned that the first time I got a check that was less than $200, considerably less for a show. And I realized, okay, if I look out that curtain and there's only a certain number of people in the stands, I'm taking my draw because that's all I'm going to get. And that happened quite a bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Sid said that too. Sid said he was losing money at some points, and eventually he basically gave the ultimatum, you got to pay me at least $1,000 a week guarantee or I'm going to leave because I'm not making any money. And I guess he eventually conceded, but Sid obviously was at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see Duke the Dumpster walking in and making that demand, although I kind of tried to later, but it didn't really work out well.
And yeah, for people that don't remember, or the younger fans out there, that the time before the Attitude Era was a very low time in the WWE, and there were some Canadian tours where the Canadian dollar is different than the American dollar, so the conversion really doesn't work out very well when you're doing these small town Canadian tours, which gets me to the story that you posted about your match, your very first match, I guess, which was in Sarnia, Ontario.
Yes.
With George the Animal Steel as the agent.
My very first house show, after the tryout and all that, and they decided they were going to hire me, and it took like a couple months for them to send me the contract and for me to start working. But when I did, the very first place I flew to for a house show was, I did Sarnia, Ontario. We flew into Michigan and we drove across the border. We did Sarnia, Ontario, then we came back and did Flint, Michigan. But yeah, Sarnia, Ontario, George the Animal Steel was the agent. I was wrestling Bastion Booger. And I just remember wanting to be involved with putting the match together. You know, I thought I had good ideas, and as we were sitting down, George Animal Steel sat down with me and Mike Shaw and to go over the match, and he started talking, telling us what he wanted, how long he wanted us to go, who was going to go over, and I kind of threw in my idea. I said, how about if we do like a body slam kind of match, where at different points in the match I try to pick him up and slam him, but you know, I try to make a comeback and slam him and I don't get him. I try to make a comeback and I just keep building up and building up, and as I'm describing this, George Animal Steel just looks at me and he goes, how about if you just listen to what I tell you to do and don't tell me anything? That was my first experience with a WWF, World Wrestling Federation agent, and with George Animal Steel as my agent. And it was, I don't know how I felt about that. It was strange. I was like, man, I came from a place where we all shared ideas, you know, in the independents down in Florida. Everybody came up with ideas and tried to make it the best show possible. And here it felt like they just immediately wanted to stifle you and shut you down in a lot of ways and mold you into something that was, now looking in hindsight, it was different than what got me there. You know, if you ever look at the promo tape I did in that interview, that's how I used to cut promos. They completely shut that down. When I came in and I got loud and started doing a loud promo, I kind of stole some of the stuff from Road Warrior Hawk. He was one of my favorite promos ever. And they immediately said, you don't need to yell like that, okay? Because later on, if you get into a deal, like a situation or a feud with someone, and it's supposed to mean something, then when you're yelling, it won't mean anything. That's how they explained it to me. But basically, they were kind of shutting down what I had done before, is what it felt like. So
what about those vignettes that they showed prior to you coming in? I guess Shane McMahon produced those?
Yes, when they flew me up for the vignettes, I met Shane McMahon at the studio, well, at the office first, and we sat down, and we threw around some ideas for the name, but I think they already had it picked pretty well, Duke the Dumpster, Droese. So they obviously could own the name, but Shane then ended up being the one that produced all my vignettes. And I think we got up at like 6 in the morning in Stamford, Connecticut, and I think he set it up to where we met a garbage truck that was in the middle of its route, somewhere out on the street. And that's where I did a lot of those vignettes, where I was on the back of a garbage truck, where he would give me the verbiage. He would say, this is what I want you to say, and I would get on the back of the truck and we'd pull it up and I'd cut the promo, and if it went well, good. If not, the truck had to back up again. And that's how I did a lot of those promos. We also did them at the dump, the local dump. He had me cut some promos there. He had that one where, I guess during that time there was a commercial where maybe Larry Bird and Michael Jordan were competing for, you know, off the rim, off the this, that, the other, in the hoop, nothing but net. So he wanted me to do one like that with the garbage can, where I threw it over a building and it supposedly bounced off a back payloader, bounced off of something else, and went into the dumpster. And so he came up with a bunch of ideas like that.
Did the Garbage Man think it was cool that there was going to be like a WWE Garbage Man character?
I think that the guy that was on the back of the truck doing some of those vignettes with me seemed to really like it. He was having a good time. And yeah, some of the guys at the dump seemed to be into it as well.
And I guess you liked the character because you came up with the original idea, right?
Yeah, it was something that I started doing down in Miami, Florida, as the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar. So the only thing that really changed was the name to Duke the Dumpster. So,
how did you find Chief Jay Strongbow as an agent?
And Chief Jay Strongbow was somebody else I had a run-in with early on, and it was at a TV taping. Early on, it was probably like a Superstars taping, and what they would do is they would put up the sheet of who was wrestling and who you were wrestling against. And then certain agents would take certain matches and they would pull those guys in. And at one point, this is like the first time I met, well, it was the second time I met Chief Jay Strongbow, and I think he already didn't like me, but he said, I was there, but the guy I was working with, I guess enhancement wrestler, whatever you want to call them, they call them job guys, he wasn't there, so we had to find him. And I said to Chief Jay Strongbow, hey, I'll go find him to save him from having to get up and go look for the guy. Well, he thought I was being arrogant. Somehow he looked at that as me being arrogant, and he laid into me and said, you don't have to do shit. I'll go get the guy, or I'll send somebody to get him. You just need to stay here and keep your mouth shut. That's what he told me. And this was like my first experience at a TV with Chief Jay Strongbow as the agent of one of my matches. And ever since that day, he hated me. He didn't like me. We didn't get along. I tried to be respectful, but it was just not a good thing.
What did you think about being put into a mini feud with Lawler right away?
I was happy about it. It seemed like it was a big deal. Right out of the gate, I don't think I was prepared for it. I often say, and like you alluded to some of the stories I've been writing lately, I often talk about the fact that I think now, looking back, I was clueless in a lot of ways to how things were run. And definitely in that first issue, that first feud with Lawler, I was clueless. And I remember I was writing with Bob Holly and Adam Baum. And we were doing the TV loop, but then we also did a house show loop like after that, I think. But the night they did the Monday Night Raw King's Court thing, where he attacked me with the can, Bob Holly and Adam Baum were freaking out. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. They were freaking out in the car. They're saying, this is huge, man. You're in the middle of some huge shit already. And I was just like, oh, really? Okay. You know, I mean, I was going to make the most of it, but it was just odd to me. And it's funny, too, there's another story with that whole attack where he hit me with the can. You know, it was live Raw. And I remember them talking about what they wanted us to do with the King's Court. And Jack Lanza, I think he was the agent that was in charge of what we were supposed to do. And Jerry Lawler got with me and he says, you think we could do something where I attack you and hit you? Because they wanted him to attack me. But he wanted to kind of spice it up and hit me with my own garbage can. Attack me, grab the can like he did, and hit me with it. Well, so we were talking about it and I was just kind of going, I don't know. But yeah, I'll be glad to do it, no problem. And so what we did, and eventually we went and talked to Jack Lanza, me and Lawler, and said, do you think it would be okay if we did that? Should we ask if we could do it? And Jack looked at us and he goes, it's live TV, screw it, just do it. And I was like, wow. So we go out, we do the King's Court thing, he attacks me, he hits me with that can, and I sell the hell out of it. And they immediately, if you watch the camera angle, as soon as he hits me with that can, it cuts way to a far shot. So you can't see up close anymore. Because they freaked out. And we do that whole deal, and we go to the back, and everybody in the back is freaking out. Apparently it was too violent for the product at that time, for the, WWF television. So, and even Shane came up to me, he goes, what happened? I go, they said they wanted to do the can deal, and I thought, I went along for the ride. I didn't try to throw anybody under the bus, but like he even came up to me and asked, and so immediately they put Gorilla, Monsoon, and Macho Man on TV because they were commentating. They were doing the commentary on the Raw, and they apologized for what had just happened and said that the fans would never see something like that again. That was bad enough. Okay, you just threw a bucket of ice water on the heat, and that was bad enough, I thought. But then I got home from that loop, whatever it was, those group of shows we were doing, And I went, because I used to always tape everything. And I would get home and watch these tapes, and I watched that particular Raw, or Superstars, whatever it was, and they made Jerry the King Lawler do this thing where he came out and apologized, you know, and it was kind of funny, it was comedy, or whatever, but he had to basically apologize for hitting me over the head with the can and just completely killing any heat behind that angle that it could have possibly had, I felt. So.
And of course, we did see garbage cans used on TV in WWE.
Not too long after I was gone, yeah. They even had a dumpster match, right?
And I understand you actually had to pay for these garbage cans.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a lot of money, and they certainly weren't spending it on Duke the Dumpster. So, the very first time I flew up and it was a Canada loop, I remember I got together I was riding with Doink the Clown and Ray Apollo at the time, and Dink, which was Tiger Jackson. First, it was just us, and later Luna would join us. But I remember coming off the plane and meeting them, and I had my garbage can, I had my bag in one hand and my garbage can in the other with tape all around it holding it together because I checked it on the plane.
Yeah.
And Doink, Apollo, he was laughing at me because he called that my Halliburton, because everybody carried these metal Halliburton briefcases at the time. And so that was my Halliburton. He was making fun of me. And for the longest time, I would bring these either on the plane, or sometimes I would look around at local hardware stores and I would buy them because they didn't. I mean, I was making my own outfits with the little garbage cans and stuff down the legs, and the hat with the garbage cans on it, or the elbow pads with the garbage trucks. I made all that stuff and paid for it.
I guess you were part of the Undertaker's BSK group. Could you talk about the Undertaker a bit?
I think at one point anybody who was not part of the clique was in BSK. When they first started it, I remember Yokozuna was talking about it, and he actually originally called it the Bone Street Killers, but then I came to find out later they were calling it Bone Street Crew. But I mean, guys even like Owen Hart and other people like that were in this group. At one point, Owen went and had toboggans made with our name on the front and BSK on the back. And I ended up later using that toboggan as part of my gimmick when they gave me the green Duke the Dumpster outfit, which was very short-lived. It kind of disappeared somehow. I can't remember how. But I was using the toboggan for that with the Duke on the front. But, you know, we would go on these, especially overseas trips. We would all be sitting in the back of the bus talking about this stuff. And everybody would be playing dominoes or doing what we did in the back. But yeah, I think a lot of people that were not part of the clique at that time were honorary members of BSK, in my opinion.
What was the Undertaker like outside of his character?
A very cool individual, very quiet most of the time. You know, he was obviously very well respected and still is. And yeah, he was just a cool individual. Nothing really seemed to rattle him. You know, you would always see other wrestlers angry, bitter, resentful, complaining about their situation. Now, granted, Taker had one of the top positions at that time, of course. But, you know, he would kind of come and go. They would bring him up and down in different issues. But you never heard him complain. Never, ever heard him complain about anything. He didn't get wrapped up in all that stuff. Sometimes wrestlers would, like certain guys would talk about the people in the clique, the guys in the clique that they didn't like, and it was just a lot of complaining and bitterness. You never heard that from Taker.
Would you like to have seen him keep his win streak alive at the WrestleManias throughout the rest of his career? Or do you think it was a good idea that they ended it?
Man, I stopped watching wrestling way before that, and I know about what you're speaking about, but And I remember hearing everybody up in arms about it when Brock Lesnar beat him. They probably should have ran that thing till like a lot longer. I think maybe till the end. Maybe ran it undefeated the whole way. That probably would have been the right thing to do.
There might never be an end as long as they still need him to draw until he dies, because they keep bringing him back.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bret Hart? I noticed you had quite a few posts about Bret.
Man, Bret Hart, for a large part of the time I was there, he was the champion. Great wrestler, respected individual. I always found it interesting that not a lot of people would hang around with him socially that much, and definitely you never saw anybody riding with him. You know, a lot of times people would buddy up and share rental cars and maybe hotels even, and he got that kind of nickname, the Lone Wolf, because he was a lone wolf, and he was well respected. At one point during my time there in the World Wrestling Federation, I was getting very frustrated, and I remember it was in a bar because he was sitting at a table and all the boys were just kind of spread throughout the bar, and I was really frustrated with the Clique and Shawn Michaels and the power that they had in the company at the time. And I just remember going to Bret Hart and saying, man, listen, I'm wore out with this. It's driving me crazy. I need some guidance. If you could kind of give me some advice. And Bret said, why don't you come ride with me? And I was like, wow, I'll be riding with the champ, you know? So I started riding with Bret for quite a while after that. And I always thought he had my best interest at heart. But looking back later on, I kind of think that he kind of manipulated me and wound me up a little bit in certain situations where I probably wouldn't have done things. Like, I remember he was the first person to ever tell me to refuse to do a job. And the first job, that first time that happened, it happened to be the ringmaster in his debut. They wanted me to work with him and go under to Steve Austin. And my contract was about up, and it was to the point where they weren't even putting me on TV hardly at all. And I would leave my gear out in the car because I said, I'm not working, because I had not worked for so long on TV. They kept me off TV. And then one night, last minute, they said, we need you to work a match. After they had already done the production meeting, everything was already up. The last second, they changed their mind and said, they're going to put Duke in with the new guy, Steve Austin, ringmaster. And so I went out and got my bag, my gear, and I brought it in the locker room. I sat down next to Bret, and I'm still just fuming. You know, they hadn't been using me at all on TV, and now when they do it once again, they want me to do a job for one of the new guys they're bringing in. And he just looked at me and he goes, I wouldn't do it. I refuse. And I'm sitting here next to the World Wrestling Federation champion, and he's telling me, don't do it, refuse to do it. I'm thinking, man, this must be the way to go. This is probably gonna be a great business maneuver. So what happened was, I went in, Droese was in an office at that time, and he just happened to be in there alone. And I went in and sat down, and I must have looked like I was going insane, because I sat down and I just remember sitting in front of him going, what do I got to do, man? What do I got to do? You know, I just kept saying that, and his eyes got really big, Bruce Pritchard. His eyes got really big, and I think he got kind of worried. And he's like, don't worry, I'm going to talk to Vince, don't worry. I think he was scared I was about to go postal on him or something. And they said, you don't have to do this match tonight, is what Bruce said. So I come out of that office, and I told Bret, they said I don't have to do it. And Fatu was sitting there, and he heard what we were talking about, and he goes, you need to go talk to Steve Austin and tell him what's going on and why. And that was a good piece of advice. And I did. I went up to Steve and I said, listen, he came up to me actually, he goes, oh, here we're working together. And I said, no, actually we're not. He goes, really? And I said, yeah, man, listen, these guys have been killing me for a long time, keeping me off TV. And tonight I decided to refuse to do a match. And it is nothing against you personally. This is what I'm telling Steve Austin. It's nothing against you personally. But I felt like I finally had to kind of take a stand. And he said, man, I understand, no problem. And later on after that, me and Steve were good buddies. We rode around a lot on the road. But that was the situation. And that was the first time Brett got me to refuse. And of course, it was at the end of my initial contract too, which is important because they were more willing to let me refuse.
You were talking about Bruce Pritchard there for a bit. What was the rest of your contact with Bruce like overall?
Bruce was an interesting person. Bruce always made it seem like he was out for your best interests. He was always your friend, but then you would hear things that, he did a certain thing in a meeting, or I could never fully tell where Bruce was coming from. I was always kind of very wary of him in a lot of ways. I think he was a good guy, but he was also he was like all the rest of those office guys. They were all yes men. I'll just go ahead and say it. That's what they were. They were yes men. And I think, yeah, he was one of them. Jerry Briscoe, Pat Patterson, all those guys. They were the same.
And speaking of Pat Patterson, you said that you thought he had something personal against you because he would always make jokes when you showed up at TV and you weren't on the card.
Yeah, like during that long period of time where they were not putting me on TV at all. He's involved in the production meeting. He knows what's going on, who's on the card, who's on TV that night, and there were many times, numerous times, where Pat Patterson would come up to me because I'd be sitting like on a TV box or something, just kind of twiddling my thumbs, or I would be watching the monitor of the matches going on, or I'd go watch monitors of people doing interviews. I would do something, try to do something productive, even though I wasn't wrestling. And he would come up and he'd say, Duke, what's wrong? What's wrong with you, buddy? You mean you're not wrestling again? He would say that shit to me. And I would do my best not to sell it because I know he wanted to get a reaction out of me like I was pissed off or something. I said, no, what are you talking about? And no sell it. But he would constantly do stuff like that. He would say things like that to me at TVs where I wasn't on TV to try to get a reaction out of me. And I just thought that was kind of a shitty move, actually.
Do you think there's anything between you and him that triggered that earlier on? Or?
As I look back, I remember when I came in for my tryout. See, I knew of Pat Patterson, but I didn't know exactly who he was. I had some friends down in Miami, Florida that knew Pat and were friends with him. Back then, they were people that used to work for the World Wrestling Federation as they were enhancement talent, but they were like, an SD Jones or, guys that would sometimes travel and do shows and do loops. They weren't just TV guys. Anyway, they would tell me about Pat Patterson and that whole situation, or what was going on and how the office worked. They would give me advice and stuff, but I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he looked like. And I just remember when I came up, it was during the time where there was the whole steroid scandal and all the stuff that went along with that. The sexual allegations and stuff like that. So I didn't think Terry Garvin, Pat Patterson, or any of those guys would be around. And I think at my tryout, Pat Patterson was there. And I just kind of remember kind of seeing him, and I remember realizing that's who he was. But it was like the second day in or something, and I had not gone up and done the customary shake the hands. Hi, my name is, it seemed like maybe I was ignoring him or kayfabing him. Maybe that's what he thought. That's all in my head. That's what I thought happened. Because he he never helped me professionally, let's put it that way. He had his certain guys, and he would help their careers and try to work on their matches and their angles all the time. And then there were certain people he just didn't really have anything to do with at all.
For the Quebecers, any memories of those two?
I worked with Pierre a lot, and I enjoyed working with him as Pierre, as Jean-Pierre Lafitte. I didn't work with Jacques a whole lot. He was actually, shortly after I started, he left. And he wasn't there during the time I was there. But yeah, I worked with Pierre quite a bit. I always thought he was a great guy. He was and is a great wrestler still to this day.
And you were telling me off camera that you've seen some of his stuff that he's been doing.
Yeah, I saw him at an independent show here in Tennessee, and it was amazing that he's still doing a lot of the stuff he did when he was a lot younger. And I know he's got to be my age, 50 years old, so.
I read kind of a funny story about a rib that Owen Hart played on Lex Luger in a match. Could you tell that story?
Oh yeah, we were in, God, where was it? Manila? In the Philippines, I think it was. Yeah, and we did 3 nights in the same building, and it was so hot. But catering, or I guess whoever, they had a big table with like fruit baskets and stuff. And then they had coffee over here, and then this and that. And what Owen did, it was Owen Hart and Yokozuna versus Lex Luger and Davey Boy. That was the tag team. And first of all, Owen packed his tights with a bunch of like the hot, rotted fruit that was left over, watermelons, things like that, and also coffee grounds I think he had in there. And he had this stuff packed in a certain place in his tights. And at one point in the match, he did this thing where he had, I guess it was kind of like a camel clutch maneuver, where he had Lex Luger stretched out and in a chin lock. And what he did is he reached in and he grabbed this fruit and the coffee and he smeared it in Lex's face. Yeah, and these people the crowd had no clue what was going on. They didn't know. I mean, this is the Philippines. So they didn't even know how to react. They were just sitting there stunned, like, what's going on? And then another thing, in the opposite tag teams, you had Owen Hart on this tag team and you had Davey Boy in this tag team. And they were in cahoots to rib Lex Luger as well, where they would do a spot where Davey would come in the ring and fire up on Owen, boom, 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 and he would press Owen up, and boom, and he'd slam him, right? And then as part of the spot, they would switch out, and Lex would come in, and what was supposed to happen is he was supposed to press Owen up as well and look strong, and Owen would completely just sandbag him, deadweight him, so he couldn't even press Owen. Lex couldn't even press Owen over his head. And he just kind of fell. He dropped him, and Lex was just like dejected. And Owen just said, "Get out, get out." He threw him out of the ring. He said, "Get out of the ring." So Lex was just like, ah.
And I guess he jumped to WCW shortly after.
This is an interesting story too, because I talk about like some of the stuff with me and Bret Hart where I think he was winding me up. I heard a conversation we were in a minivan. It was me and Bret and Owen and Davey. And I remember Davey talking to Bret about like ways that he was winding up Lex Luger and getting him frustrated. And Lex ended up leaving the company. And I think he took, in some strange way, Davey took a little bit of pride in the fact that he wound up Lex to the point where he got pissed off about the money and the work and his spot, and that's it. And he got out of there and he jumped to WCW.
Sounds like a lot like what Bret was doing to you.
That's exactly right. Bret had me. I'll tell you the second time Bret told me to refuse to do a job. It was at the pay-per-view match with me and Triple H, and I'll never forget that. as that was developing and they did the whole deal where he cut my hair, it was because I wanted to change my appearance and I wanted to turn heel. And I was asking them for that. And what they decided, Jim Ross came up with the idea that they should let Triple H cut my hair as part of the angle. And I agreed to it. I said, that's fine as long as you let me get some kind of revenge in the end. I know I'm not going to beat him. I didn't say this, but it was because he was in the clique. I knew I wasn't going to beat him because he's in the clique. But as long as I got some kind of revenge in the end. And they said, yeah, absolutely. Well, then by the time we got to the night before, I remember, because there was no cell phones really then, we were at a restaurant or something, and somebody said, you need to call Jerry Briscoe. Pretty sure it was Briscoe. You need to call Briscoe. And I called him, and he informed me of the finish, and there wasn't any revenge or anything. It was just like, okay, it's a fuck finish. You're gonna get hit with the lid and pinned 1, 2, 3. And I was just like, that isn't exactly what we talked about. So I go and talk to Bret Hart about it, and I'm like, this isn't what we talked about. What do you think? He goes, I'd refuse to do it. He said it again. He go, I'd refuse to do it. I go, they had just renewed my contract. So my position wasn't as good now. I didn't have a bargaining position because I couldn't leave because I was in for another year. First 2-year contract and then rolled over 1 year at a time. Anyway, he said, you should refuse to do it. I was like, I don't know, man. And he goes, you know what I think you should do? You should talk to Vince. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, okay. We were in the town of the pay-per-view, all in the hotel. All the TV people were there. And he goes, here's Vince's room number. He gave me his room number, and he said, call Vince. And I was so whacked out of my brain, I thought that was a good idea. So I called Vince at 8 a.m. the morning of the pay-per-view. And I said, Vince, I want to talk to you about the match. He said, I'm eating breakfast right now. Can I call you after? And I said, yeah. And I gave him my room number. Anyway, he called me back. He's like, what's going on, pal? And I said, Vince, I got the finish from Jerry last night, and it's not what we talked about. And I went into the whole thing, and I said, I don't think it's not a good idea, you know. And Vince, his whole demeanor changed immediately. Okay. He said, it's not like we're working on a 3 to 6 month run for Duke the Dumpster to become the World Wrestling Federation champion. Now, I knew that was the case, obviously, but it kind of stung when he said it. And the next thing he said was, what you need to do is just show up at the pay-per-view like you always do, with a smile on your face, and do your job. And that was a very bitter pill to swallow, but I did. I kind of smiled like a smartass when I saw him at the TV, but that's what I did. I showed up and just did it the way they said do it. I didn't refuse. And of course, I told Brett, I said I couldn't refuse because I just started a new contract and, you know, I'd be in a breach of contract. And he goes, okay, well, you need to take a step back and draw a new line in the sand. That was what he said. Draw a new line in the sand. Like Duke the Dumpster had such a bargaining position. So, yeah, that was the second occurrence. And that wasn't even the worst one. That wasn't even the worst.
At this point, you got to tell us the worst one.
The worst one. After the Triple H deal, and I was wanting to turn heel, Brett, I don't think we were riding together so much anymore. But I was still trying to take advice from him because I still couldn't recognize the fact that he was winding me up. Of course, I was messed up most of the time anyway, but at that point. But at one point we were talking about how I could become a heel. And Brett's opinion was that I needed to come up with 3 opponents, 1, 2, 3, that I could beat. 3 baby faces. 1, 2, 3, on my way to becoming a strong heel. That's kind of how the buildup would work. I said, that sounds great, you know. I think I said Bob Holly, Fatu, and somebody else. I don't know. Those were my 3 people. Sorry, guys. But anyway, Brett then says, you know what I think you should do? He said, I think you should call Vince and talk to him about it. So what he then did next, Bret Hart did, he gave me Vince's home phone number and said, you should call Vince at home and tell him your ideas.
You didn't learn from the first.
Oh! No, brother, I was so out there. I mean, I was on a lot of painkillers, man, and drinking a lot of booze at night. But yeah, that sounded like a good idea for some reason. I always make the joke, his housekeeper was a very nice person, but and Vince was very nice to me too when he spoke to me at home. I called him a few times. He was always nice to me about it, but it wasn't a good idea because after that point, things noticeably changed, like at TV tapings. You know, you think I wasn't getting booked on shows before. Now it was every new guy that came in, Duke was the first one that, you know, did the honors for him, did the job. TL, Hopper, Mankind, all these guys came in after. And I was like one of the first guys that they fed to him. So I realized my position was not good at that point.
But look at what TL Hopper turned out to be, a huge star.
Yeah. After he stuck that plunger in my face. I don't know why I agreed to that either. But it is what it is.
Did you have any experiences with Marty Jannetty?
Marty Jannetty was a trip. He was always fun to hang around with. They brought him back in to do the New Rockers thing with Al Snow during the time I was there. And at one point, when they were still kind of talking about possibly making me a heel, a bit earlier on, I think, actually, Bill Watts came in. They brought in Bill Watts, and he was supposed to kind of, I don't know what he was supposed to do, but he was coming up with ideas or matches, and he wanted to see me wrestle as a heel. So what they did is they had me wrestle, I think it was like a Superstars match or something, against Marty Jannetty. And we had a pretty good match. I was working heel. I thought it went well. I guess they didn't think it went well enough to turn me heel at that point. But yeah, he was just always a trip. It was fun to work with. He was fun to hang out with, that's for sure. But yeah, Marty's always been a good guy. I just saw him recently too at an appearance. So.
Yeah, I saw him at the Orlando WrestleMania weekend, and he obviously still had his demons because he was literally falling down drunk outside of a restaurant with a couple of females. So
I always hate to hear that. You know, even like certain people that maybe I had difficult times with when I was coming through the company, even so, if I hear like now currently that they're struggling with the demons, like you said, if they have drug problems or alcohol problems, I always wish the best for them because I know personally how bad that is, and I would never wish that even on my worst enemies, actually.
Well, you mentioned it a couple times. If you just wanted to get into the start of when did you start taking pain pills?
Pain pills, painkillers. In the World Wrestling Federation, when I first came in, I didn't take anything. I didn't take any pills. I didn't really even drink at first, any alcohol, any beer. I remember, though, specifically at one point when I was working with Triple H, that later on when we were kind of building up to that pay-per-view match, we were doing a lot of house shows together. And it was in the Meadowlands. I don't know if they called it the Meadowlands Arena back then, or whatever they called it in New Jersey, but every night we would do this spot where I would be making a comeback on him, and I would come across the ring. Somehow I would hit the ropes, come across the ring, and at the last second he would duck down and he would backdrop me over the top rope, out of the ring, to the floor. And every night we did this. Every night I would hook that rope as I went over. You know, you hook that top rope and break your fall. This one night in New Jersey, we did that spot, and I missed the rope as I went over. So I just took a free fall over like a backdrop over the top rope, free fall to the concrete floor, seated on my ass. I landed right on my ass, boom, in a seated position. And it literally felt like I was paralyzed for a second. And I laid there, and the ref knew. He came flying out. And he's like, "Are you all right, Duke? You all right?" And I just kind of looked at him and said, "Tell him to waste some time." And that's exactly what he did. You know, he did the old turn to the crowd, yelling at him thing. And I ended up getting back in the ring, and we finished the match. But after that point was when the drug use got really heavy, really heavy. So
it was like Soma.
You know what? There was a different little cocktail of pills for each situation. You wake up in the morning, so to get out of bed, you do 5 hydros. To get to the gym, you take a couple more hydros and drink some coffee. Back then, they still had those white crosses, the ephedrine pills. You take some of those with your coffee and get to the gym. After that, you end up going to the building. To get in the ring, you take a couple of these and a couple of those painkillers. And then at night, you had your cocktail to go to sleep. After the show, at the bar, a lot of guys would take Somas or Xanax or a combination. And it was just constantly something to come up and something to go down. But it was always a handful of this or a handful of that.
Speaking of going outside of the ring, I saw a clip of the 1995 Royal Rumble, and I was wondering if this was a planned spot or not, but you landed on Earl Hebner, and it looks like he was saying the F word after.
He was dog cussing me. It was not planned. I'm just going to tell you. I mean, Shawn might have knew what he was doing, because, you know, Shawn Michaels is one of the most aware people in that ring I've ever seen. So he always knows what's going on around him everywhere. So maybe he knew Earl was right behind him outside the ring. I didn't even see Earl at all. And what happened was, it was my time to go. It was my time to go out of the ring. And whoever went before me, I saw them go. And I happened to be with Shawn. And I said, "All right, it's time for me. Just go ahead and throw me out." And he just ducked down and he backdropped me as hard as he could. Right up over the top rope. And I went over the top rope, and right as I went over the top rope, I saw Earl Hebner, the referee, walking right past, and he wasn't looking at me at all. And I just flew. There's nothing I could do. I was already in midair.
Yeah.
And I flew down, and I landed on him, boom, and he fell, and you can see his face, the tape shows. He starts cussing me. He's like, "Fuck, Duke." And I put my face in the mat, and I just apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I just buried my face straight down like that. I felt so bad, but yeah, I landed on him full weight, man. I landed on him hard.
What did you weigh legit about then? Because you look like you're gotta be close to 300 now with your height.
Then I was about 300 or 305 in the beginning, but I was heavier. I was carrying more fat, especially in the beginning, man. When I was wearing the light-colored shirt over the thing, originally Shane grabbed a shirt at the dump we were doing the vignettes at, and he had me put it on because I still had an old gimmick that said Rocco on it, the jumpsuit. And I wore that for a while, but when I was wearing that, I was heavy, man. I was maybe even up to like 310, 315. But then, towards the end of the first contract, that second year, the first deal is 2 years. During that second year, I made a conscious effort to get in shape. I worked out hard, and I dropped all the way down at one point to 275. I was in great shape. That's incidentally when they did the Triple H thing, and first I refused to do the match, and they did the Triple H thing. I was in great shape. They gave me the Green Hornet outfit briefly. I was a lot skinnier then. Now I'm about 285, 290.
And you actually did get a victory over Triple H at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, so I got that going for me. We did a free-for-all match. It was the first time they did that before the Rumble? I think it might have been before the Royal Rumble, because I know it determined who went in first and who went in 30th.
Yeah.
Whoever lost had to go in first, because that means you got to stay there the whole time if you want to win and beat all the other superstars.
Right.
And then the winner of that free-for-all beginning match got to go in number 30, which is, supposed to be the easiest number to go in, even though I went in number 30, and it didn't do me any good because I got thrown out in a couple minutes. But I know they weren't going to let me pin him, that's for sure. They didn't let me pin anybody. Actually, if you ever see, anytime I won against somebody else that was a name that had a gimmick, or however you want to say that, it was either by a DQ or a count out. I beat Triple H that day by disqualification because he had brass knucks. He hit me, it knocked me out, he pinned me, and Gorilla Monsoon comes out and reverses the decision, thereby giving me the victory. But that was the only way I was going to win. Another time it was Jerry Lawler. I beat him by count out. I couldn't pin him either.
Very glorious victories for sure.
Yes, glorious victories for the Dumpster.
And Mick Foley, you mentioned that you did a job for him when he first came in. Any thoughts on him?
Mick Foley, another great guy, great attitude, very funny guy. When I used to watch Mick, when I used to watch him wrestle in WCW as Cactus Jack, I thought he was reckless. I thought he looked dangerous the way he worked. I had my own, I guess, preconceived notion about him, preconception, I guess is the word, about what the way I thought he worked. Anyway, it got to the point he came in as Mankind in the World Wrestling Federation, and I wrestled him. He was one of the new guys that came in that I had to lose to, and I got in there and we started the match. And he had this spot, I never forget, he had this spot where he had you sitting in the corner and he would run across the ring, turn around and come charging back and knee the guy right in the face. And I used to look at that and I go, how does he not hit you with that? I got in the ring with Mick Foley and we did this match. Not only was that knee to the face completely light, everything he did was light as a feather. I was amazed at how good he was and how much control he had over everything he did. Now, he may have hurt himself a lot, but he never hurt the guy he was working with that I could tell. He certainly didn't hurt me at all.
And you've brought up the Clique a few times in this. Can you just go into a bit more detail about the Clique and your interactions with Shawn Michaels himself?
I always tried to get along with everybody. I remember hearing, even back then, they would say, I guess it was Chief Jay Strongbow that said, in this business you can either make money or make friends. Well, apparently I made a lot of friends because I didn't make no money. But I always tried to be friends with everybody, and including the guys from the Clique that I thought were dickheads sometimes, most of the time. I thought they were arrogant. I thought they had too much control in that company, but there was nothing you could do about it unless you kind of raised your own stock by doing something. But I tried to get along, but many times that I found myself out at clubs or in bars with those guys or different combinations of them, and there were instances where, and he's already talked about this on his own, but Shawn Michaels was pretty messed up back then as well. And there was times where I found myself babysitting him and Scott Hall sometimes and getting them out of bars because they were so messed up and into potential fight situations on a number of occasions. I was kind of like, not the designated driver, even though I was that too. I was the least fucked up of the bunch, I guess, at that time when I would hang out with them. But I was also, if Kevin Nash wasn't around, or some of those other guys, I was kind of like the bodyguard that I would just kind of hang around and make sure nobody messed with Shawn or Scott, or if Waltman was around. From time to time I would do that.
Because I've heard Scott Hall himself say that Shawn didn't care that much about getting beat up, and he would actually try and be rude sometimes. Like, he wouldn't care about being rude, even if it was a situation he couldn't win.
There was times where he, again, it was arrogance, and when he got messed up, it kind of got worse. I told the story about this time I can't remember where it was, times I'm bad with dates and I'm bad with towns. But I remember we were at a bar, and I think it was like Washington somewhere. But anyway, Sean was messed up, and it was just me, him, and I think Scott Hall was there. And I told this story, but there was a group of dudes in this bar, man. They were pretty big, and they were drunk. We were all messed up, and Sean was really messed up, and he started talking shit to them, and they didn't like it. I think he was saying something like they weren't going to get laid because we were there. Basically, the wrestlers were there, and they didn't have a chance. And these guys were pissed. But what ended up happening is they wanted to fight. They really wanted to fight. And I just remember what I ended up doing. The biggest one, I grabbed him by his ears and I kissed him on the lips. This big drunk dude in a bar. I grabbed him and I kissed him on the lips and stunned him basically long enough for me to grab Sean and get us out of there, because there was a big group of them. There was a bunch of them. There's probably like 6 of them, and they didn't know quite what to do when I did that, but it worked. So, and I didn't have to get in a fight.
So you were gone by the time that Syracuse incident happened, I guess?
No, I was there, but I wasn't on that loop.
Oh, okay.
I remember sitting with Sean and Kevin Nash afterwards and telling Sean, well, if I was there, that shit wouldn't have happened. I don't know if it would have or not. I don't even know if I would have been with him that night, but I tried, even if I didn't necessarily like somebody personally, you always try to kind of look out for the boys. And you knew Sean at that point was on his way to becoming the champion, and you kind of want to protect the company in that respect. Whoever is on top or is going to be on top, you kind of look out. And we just look out for each other in general anyway, regardless of personal feelings, aside.
And you've written a bunch about Goldust. Could you tell us some stories about Goldust?
Dustin was one of the funniest dudes I've ever met. But when he came in, not a lot of people know this, when he first came in, and as the Goldust gimmick, he didn't want to exactly play it gay, like a gay character, which he ended up doing later. But it seemed like he was really against it in the beginning. And I just remember we were somewhere in Canada, and me and Savio having a conversation with him. It was in the very beginning when he first started there. It was like maybe his first house show loop. And we were convincing him. We said, listen, just play it like you're kind of gay. He's like, I don't know, guys. He was really, really unsure of how to do it. He was really trying to figure it out. He wanted to kind of be this eccentric guy that was really into movies, because they had him quoting movies and all that stuff. But me and Savio definitely were kind of egging him to take it to the next level and have some kind of gay undertones to it. And he went out one night in this town, and I was wrestling him. I was probably one of the first people to wrestle him on house shows. And he went out and just did the thing where he puts his hands on and did that whole deal. And I'm telling you, I've never seen a crowd get so angry at the heat of a heel as they did that night with him. It was amazing. And I think from that point on, he realized that was the ticket. That was what he needed to do. But it was just interesting to see it come together, because he was really unsure in the beginning of exactly how. He had his ideas on the way he wanted to do it, but it worked a lot better when he really, really kind of souped it up some.
And it's unbelievable that they're still using that character off and on now, after all these years.
He got it over like gangbusters, and he got longevity out of it. Absolutely. He did the most. I mean, if you look at it, just like his dad did with the polka dots, he got Goldust over huge, and he still does to this day.
Any stories about Adam Baum, who I know you rode with a bit?
Yeah, I rode with Bob Holly and Adam Baum in the beginning. Brian, he was very bitter. Even then, he was very bitter about what they were not doing with him. Apparently, see, he had come in, I guess, not too far before when I came in, and they were going to make him this big monster heel, but it didn't work out, apparently. And at that point, when I got there, he just wasn't happy. I have to say, later on, I could completely relate and understand why he felt that way, because I had a lot of the same stuff going on with me. But he was just so angry, and Bob Holly at the time was angry and bitter a lot of the time. But I think what is important is whether or not you continue to be bitter after you leave a company or the business. And I think I've heard some shoot interviews with Brian, and he still seems bitter. I've heard Bob Holly talk some too, and I don't know. He had a good run though as Hardcore Holly, but if you continue to be bitter, I was bitter for a long time. Shit, I'll admit that. But that shit'll eat you alive. But yeah, he always seemed like he was angry. I remember working with him early on when I came in, and I had just started, and I wanted to work out and get in shape, because as I said, I came in kind of heavy. And one night before I worked him, one day, we went to the gym, and I trained legs really hard to the point where I could barely walk. And we wrestled, and I couldn't do shit in the ring that night. I could not do anything. It was like the worst. So he was even more pissed off. And then on top of that, it was like up there near Connecticut somewhere, because Pat Patterson was at the show. I think Jerry Briscoe maybe was at the show. This was a house show. And they came to watch us work. And it was just horrible. And it was all my fault. I couldn't do anything. And I was trying to tell him, man, that's not how I work. I'm much better than that, I promise you. But my legs were just like freaking noodles. I couldn't do anything. And that was like one of my first experiences working against him. And it wasn't good.
At what point did you have that conversation with Jim Ross where he told you that you need to get as big as possible?
That's after I left.
Okay.
When I left in 96, Jerry Briscoe told me I could go. There's a whole long story about that too, but basically it ended up I went home in 96, like halfway through the year contract. I still had like 6 months at least, 6 or 8 months left on it. And they said, you go ahead on home. Anyway, I went home and I just started training and lifting weights and doing that thing. And during that time, I went to Germany for that season. And when I got back, was when I started talking to them again. And I was talking to Bruce Pritchard. And this was one of the reasons I looked back and kind of wondered about Bruce. But Bruce said, I told Bruce, I said, I wanted to take a shot at coming back. And he said, okay, that sounds good. Let me talk to everybody and we'll set it up and we'll bring you in. So I was still at home training, preparing, and Bruce had set me up a tryout date. I had to come back and try out again, which was interesting, but I was willing to do it. At one point, before the tryout came along, I got a call at home from Jim Ross. And Jim Ross said, we have an idea for you, but in order for this idea to work, you can't show up for the tryout. And we need you to get as big as possible. Now, I'm not telling you to do steroids because that would be illegal, but you need to get as big as you can. That's what he said to me.
There was no testing during that period.
They had stopped testing probably about a year after I left. I remember Savio Vega called me at home and he said they stopped drug testing. They sent out a memo saying it was not cost effective anymore or something like that. It was too expensive to drug test people. So they stopped and they would only test on a as needed basis, which is basically kind of letting the reins go with the boys, and that's when a lot of guys started dying too. But yeah, there was no testing then, so he didn't tell me to do steroids because he couldn't do that, but he said I needed to get as big as possible. And then what ended up happening, I got a plane ticket in the mail for the tryout. And I didn't know what to do, I didn't know exactly what Jim Ross's position was at that time, which ended up he was like the main guy, you know, as far as talent was concerned. But I called Bruce and said, Jim called me and said, don't show up for the tryout, but you guys sent me a ticket. What should I do? And Bruce Pritchard said, still come to the tryout. So I did. I still showed up for that tryout. Funny thing about the tryout, I also had a tryout at that time for WCW. They were like within a week of each other, maybe. It wasn't very far apart at all. And I just remember I was still talking to Steve Austin and I was still talking to Bret Hart. And I asked them both for advice. What should I do? Bret Hart said you should do them both. Do both tryouts. You know, that's the professional thing to do. Do both, go try out for both companies. Steve Austin, on the other hand, said you need to pick one. You need to choose who you would prefer to work with or for and go do their tryout, because these are very vindictive people and they will get pissed off and take it personally if you go do both. Well, unfortunately, I took Bret's advice and I went and did both tryouts, and neither place called after that, of course. So
You mentioned at one point Luna was driving with the clowns, and Tiger Jackson has told me himself that Luna and Bam Bam were harassing him at one point. So I was wondering how they got along when they were all driving together.
when I rode with the clowns and Luna early on, and it was a Canada loop as well. It was up there around Nova Scotia and what is it?
New Brunswick.
New Brunswick, yeah, that loop, St. John's, all that stuff, Halifax. Bam Bam didn't ride with us though. Actually, at this point, and it was still early on, Luna was, on this loop, she was wrestling Alundra Blaze. She was not with Bam Bam on this thing. So the four of us, it was the clowns, me, and Luna, we rode together. Luna didn't have any problems with any of us in the car. It was just other people, people out, people that weren't involved in the wrestling. One of the hotels we stopped at in one of those towns, we were checking into our rooms, and it was like me and the clowns, they had the beds, and we had a cot. I think Tiger was going to sleep on the cot. Anyway, we were checking into the room, and Tiger Jackson came running into the room screaming, and he used to call Ray Apollo, "Papa, Papa, Luna, she's killing somebody." And we walked outside, and Luna was standing over this guy. He was laying on the ground, and she was spitting and cussing him and saying, "Don't you ever fucking say that to me again." And what had happened was this guy apparently thought it was a good idea to come up and ask Luna if she had drugs. So what she said. And she just put him on the ground and about knocked him out. I think he was drunk on top of everything else, the guy, but
Yeah.
it was not a pretty sight.
That's hilarious. And speaking of that, Luna versus Alundra Blaze, could you tell us the rib that they played on you?
Well, I don't think it was both of them. I think it was mainly Luna that played this rib on me. But
Okay.
this, again, was early on, and I was at... I remember being at the bar with the boys, and Alundra was there, and Luna was somewhere. But Alundra, I had the long hair, when I came in. And Alundra Blaze, Medusa, she grabbed me from behind, but she was sitting like up on a bar. And she grabbed me and pulled me like between her legs, not like in a sexual, I was facing the other direction. But she was just kind of like massaging my shoulders, Of course, I'm going, what's going on? Wondering what was up with that. And Kevin Nash kind of gave me a funny look during that thing too, to the point where I asked him, we're not going to have a problem, are we? And he's like, no, I don't fight the boys or something like that. But it seemed weird. But what ended up happening was, later on that evening, Luna called me because, as I said, I was the new guy in the company. And I knew Luna from Florida and knew Luna from Miami. And she called me and said, come to the room, she wanted to talk to me. And she was just kind of asking me how things were going. She was like, how are things going for you so far? Is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, and then her phone rang, and she started talking to somebody on the phone as I was standing there, and she started saying things like, do you want me to tell him? He's right here. So I figured out whoever she's talking to is talking about me. So I thought. And she played this whole thing, and what she ended up doing is telling me that was Alundra Medusa on the phone, and she was asking about me. Now this is the perfect rib because, as I said, Luna was kind of massaging my shoulders in the bar. She wasn't necessarily coming on to me, but she was just being nice. But Luna took the opportunity, and she made it sound like Alundra was interested in me. So what she did is she gave me Alundra's room number. I always get ribbed with the room numbers. I'm such a sucker. She gave me Alundra's room number and said she wants you to come down there. So I just remember going to Alundra's room and knocking on the door, and she opened the door and she had a phone in her hand, and she just looked at me and started laughing like, what the hell are you doing here? And I realized, oh my God. And I realized at that moment how ruthless these people were, and that I had to be on my guard forever and always.
Well, Alundra did date Greg Valentine for a while, so you would have been a couple steps up from him at least.
Well, and I think she was just coming out of that relationship at the time. If I remember what Luna was saying, she was saying she was dating. She said that she was dating Valentine before that, but they weren't dating anymore or something. I didn't know. I was just stupid.
And the 6-man tag match that involved X-Pac, where you kicked him in the mouth and he shit himself. Could you tell us that story?
They had a 6-man tag at some point where it was me and the Bushwhackers versus Isaac Yankem, DDS, Kane, 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman, and I believe it was Al Snow as Leif Cassidy. That was the 6-man tag, me and the Bushwhackers and those 3 guys. And there's one night in particular, and Shawn Michaels was on the card because I remember this part vividly. One night during the match, 1-2-3 Kid was lighting me up, and he was getting heat on me, and I was selling, and he was throwing all the kicks and stuff that he does, and he was laying them in, and he was hitting me pretty good a few times, and I was just pissed off. I didn't like it, and at some point, I believe we did a spot where he did something where he hit the ropes or something and came back, and as he came back, I was supposed to kick him, but I did a mafia kick where I reached up my foot and kicked him, and I hit him right in the face. And his whole mouth was just, had blood all over it. And when he got back to the locker room, I was sitting there, taking my boots off. And Sean was sitting next to me. And 1-2-3 Kid came in and looked at Shawn Michaels, but his mouth was full of blood. And he kind of held it like this and looked at Shawn like, can you see what he did to me? And I'll never forget, it was strange to me, but Shawn Michaels looked at him and said, well, I guess you shouldn't have kicked him so hard. I was shocked at that moment that Shawn Michaels kind of was on my side, but that was the reason that it happened, and that was the reason he got a bloody mouth. And also, during that match, 1-2-3 Kid apparently had crapped his pants so bad that he had to throw the freaking tights away. It was horrible. I don't know if that was necessarily when I kicked him, but it happened in the same match.
And you've mentioned that King Kong Bundy was very stiff to work with.
Yeah, he was... King Kong Bundy didn't like me. King Kong Bundy, at some point, I don't know, we had a conversation where I told him my dad was an attorney. So he thought, in his head, he thought I was like this rich, privileged kid that didn't deserve to be in the World Wrestling Federation, which is the farthest thing from the truth. I didn't come from a wealthy family. But he just talked a lot of shit. And when we wrestled, he was difficult. And I know this one particular time, and there's tape of it, it's a TV match. He drops a fucking knee on my face, and he almost breaks my fucking nose. I was sitting there, and he brought me up in a chin lock, and I'm going, what the fuck are you doing? He had no business dropping a knee because he had no control over his big ass body apparently. So, but yeah, me and Bundy, we didn't get along too well.
And he was managed by Ted DiBiase at the time. Sid was telling us that Ted was known for having sex with some of the uglier women at the bars. Did you notice anything like that?
I'll tell you what, I saw that interview with Sid. I heard things, but apparently I was at different bars. But I heard the same things, but I never saw that.
And locking the loops of Henry Godwin's new shoes, you said you did that on a regular basis.
Yeah, the thing, all right. Whenever you are in a wrestler, whenever we were in buildings, if you saw anywhere in that building a lock that was unlocked, hanging from a locker, from a door, from a whatever, if you saw a lock that was unlocked, you grabbed it for ribbing purposes later. And I would always grab it. Every time I grabbed a lock, it seemed like me and Godwin were on the same loop in the same shows. And we would end up at the same fucking bar at night after the show. And what would always happen is I would just kind of be sitting just like this in a chair across from somebody else drinking a beer. And Henry Godwin, Mark, would come walking up to talk to me and whoever. And he'd just be always perfectly stood right next to me. And I would have this lock. And I would just reach it down. And there's these little loops on the back of your shoes. And I would just click, lock it. And, he would be just drunk enough to where he didn't notice it till he got pretty far away. Now, of course, he says he knew it was me every time it happened. But I got him a few times with that. But yeah, the old lock on you could lock people's bags up to a locker or lock it to anything you wanted to. People would do that stuff all the time with locks that we would find.
Did you have any contact with Roddy Piper when he was back there for a little bit?
When he came back, was it WrestleMania 12? Yeah.
Yeah.
With the
Gold
Dust, yeah. At that time, that was when Brett was going to drop it to Sean, right?
The big,
Yeah, I was riding with Brett at that time. And I just remember when Piper came in, Brett picked him up. So it was Brett driving, Piper sitting next to him, and me in the back seat. And I just sat there and listened to these guys talk. And they had a lot of discussions about WCW at that time. Brett was really kind of mulling it over on what he wanted to do, is whether or not he was going to go to WCW or not. And Piper was giving him his opinion. I don't remember what he was saying, though, if he told him to go or not at that point. This was early on. This was way before the later stuff with the Montreal Screwjob and everything.
Yeah.
This was before all that. It was 95, 96. 96, I think that's when it was. Yeah, so they just had discussions about different things, and I just sat back there and listened. I didn't have nothing to say or nothing to add to that conversation. But that was the only contact I had with Piper, that short period where he came in right before that WrestleMania.
And the match I remember you for most was a match with Mantar that I happened to see you in Kingston, Ontario during your run. You've written some stories about Mantar. Do you want to share one with us?
Me and Mantar wrestled quite a bit too for a while when he came in. And we had a pretty good match we were doing on house shows. And I always had fun working with him. He was a big dude. He worked a little snug, not stiff, but you knew he was there. But man, he could move good for a big guy too. But we had this spot where it was just kind of like the spot I was doing with Triple H where he would backdrop me. It was just something we did every night. Every night we did it. And this spot was, I would make a comeback, do the old elbows to the gut, hit the ropes, come off, boom, boom, whatever. Hit the ropes. He would throw the knee to the gut, and I would do the flip forward. Well, on this particular night, we did the thing, and I came up. I made the comeback. I elbowed him in the stomach a bunch of times. I hit the ropes. I came off. He didn't hit me with the knee that I was expecting, and I took the front flip bump anyway. So it was like an invisible knee to the gut. And I'll never forget that night in the bar, Dick Murdoch was brought in at that time for a Rumble. And he was at some of these shows, wrestling on some of these shows, I believe. But this particular night, he blasted me at the bar about it. He laid into me, and I had never spoken to Dick Murdoch before that ever. And I never spoke to him afterwards. But he had a few drinks at the bar, and he took that opportunity to let me know how absolutely fucking horrible that spot was. And I just kind of tried to be respectful, and, you know, I think he asked me what I called it, and he said something, piece of shit knee lift spot or something. I said, maybe that's what I should call it. It's a piece of shit knee lift spot. And he kind of grumbled at me a little bit, and then we just went our separate ways. But yeah, working with Mantar, it was fun. It was interesting. I always loved working with Mike.
There was a story where he took a bunch of pills and then feasted.
Yeah, we were at an airport bar one time. I think it was in Los Angeles, but we all were getting ready to go home, and we were just sitting at the bar, and we were there for a long time too, it seemed. And I just remember, in this case, they had these Xanax bars, 2 milligrams, a sleeping pill. It's a very powerful pill. And I put it in his drink. But what I did is I held it in my hand and looked at him until he looked at me. And I laughed as I dropped it in his drink. So he saw me do it. And he said, I ain't fucking scared. And he drank it. This sumbitch ended up taking 4 of these. And it didn't even faze him. He just kind of we watched him, he just kind of walked off to his plane, to his flight. That was one of the most amazing things I ever saw, though. Yeah, I tried to dose him up with Xanax, and he was right. He had every right to not be scared because it didn't affect him.
There's another bar incident you talked about with Bob Backlund, who I find to be an interesting character.
Bob Backlund, when he did the whole heel turn, where he, went crazy. At one point, I was working with him on house shows. Again, I don't remember where it was. But one thing about Bob is, you never really. I was always at the bar, always. But you never see Bob Backlund at the bar. Well, this one night, we were all at the bar, and I was down at one end doing my thing and drinking and whatever, and I looked down and there's Bob Backlund at the end of the friggin' bar with maybe a couple of other heel wrestlers and some fans around them, and he was drinking milk. Bob Backlund was drinking milk in the bar. Anyway, I walked up to him and kind of patted, I was feeling good. I was drunk. I walked up and patted him on the back. Hey, Bob, man, it's good to see you out. Man, he turned around and cut a promo on me because I wasn't kayfabing, basically. He screamed, "Get the heck away from me!" He screamed at the top of his lungs, in character.
Well, that's not actually his character. I've seen him do that in person, too.
I believe it. He was, he's still trying to protect the business at that point. But I learned, to stay away from Bob out and about, especially if you just wrestled him, like across the street in the building, so.
He reminds me of a time bomb that's always about to explode because he goes from being very calm and talking very low to going off for no reason.
Yeah, I saw that a couple times, and also he would did this thing with the presidents where he would name all the presidents, maybe 4.
Yeah, you'd have to name all the presidents to get his autograph.
Oh yeah, but I would sit there and listen to him name them off, and I was like, wow. He was always reading books in the back a lot of the time, and I understand why he did that to me that night. He was making a point. Because again, I said in many ways, I was clueless while I was there, and that was one of them. So.
And just for the record, I do like him. I just find him to be a little unusual to be around just with the way he acts. I've never really met anyone that acts like that. But any memories of your match with Vader on Raw?
Well, you know, Vader was always infamous for throwing live rounds, as Scott Hall likes to say, and Leon threw them live rounds, and he opened up the match. We called him the waffles. He would throw those freaking forearms to your head, boom, and he would just wail on you. We called them waffles. He was hitting me with those waffles, and I was just gritting my teeth, and I was getting pissed off. I was like, so we worked our way through the match a little bit further, and then we did this spot where I can't remember who hit the ropes to her. What we ended up doing, we did something where he hit it. Anyway, we both came off the ropes, and I was supposed to kick him in the stomach, but I ended up kicking him like right in the balls, and you can see it if you watch the tape. I kicked him right in the balls, and then I hit him in the back of the shoulders and the back of the neck a bunch of times with forearms, and then we did this thing where I clotheslined him over the top rope. And we went out onto the floor pretty heavy, and as we hit the floor, this is the thing I remembered the most. We hit the floor, and his voice, he wasn't crying, but he was like, please, don't take off the mask, please. I wasn't trying to take off his mask, but that's what he was saying to me. He said, not the mask, don't take off the mask. And I always found that to be funny. This big, strong Vader with the reputation, and he was almost whimpering about his mask coming off in the middle of a match. But yeah, he was definitely throwing live rounds, and I threw a few back.
Yeah, I did an interview with him, and he's a very entertaining guy to be around, actually.
Yeah, he was a great dude.
I could understand he wouldn't be the most fun to wrestle.
He'd get a little excited in there sometimes, I think that's what it was. He would get a little excited, and yeah, he would throw them live rounds, that's for sure.
And your matches with Jeff Jarrett?
I didn't have many with Jeff. I just, I know I had that TV match. I don't know. I don't think we had many matches. We had the TV match, though, where they set up his angle with Mabel from Men on a Mission, and Jeff Jarrett, the finish was a fuck finish where he pinned me somehow. I don't know if it was pulling tights or something. With his feet on the ropes. You know, somebody always had to come and save me and reverse the decision. I think in this case, though, Mabel came down with Oscar. I don't know if maybe Mo was with him too, the whole Men on a Mission thing. And Oscar was doing a rap about how Jeff Jarrett cheated as they were coming to the ring. And the ref apparently took that as enough to reverse the decision or something, and that set up an angle for Mabel.
That tells you at the point that WWE was the manager comes down and does a rap complete.
That's exactly what they did, and it was, I don't know, it was just strange, but I think that's the only time I really remembered wrestling Jarrett.
And we've used Gangrel in Great North Wrestling. I think you wrestled him when he was enhancement talent under a mask. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I knew Dave from Florida before he came up. He would come up from time to time and do enhancement matches and put guys over as the Vampire Warrior. Sometimes he had a different hood on, or he used to be one of the Blackhearts. Dave is a great guy, and Dave is one of those guys that absolutely deserved to get a push, and it took him a while for the office to come around and see what he was worth. But I'm glad that it worked out for him, because he was definitely deserving of it.
Now, we alluded to this before, but why did you ultimately leave the WWE?
What was happening is I was into that we did the first 2 years, and I was in the second contract, which was a 1-year deal. It was the same thing, though. 10 matches, guaranteed 150 a match. That's all you were guaranteed. Anyway, we did right as I went into the new contract is when they did the Triple H thing. And things looked promising, and then it kind of just fell apart. And as I said, I got injured wrestling Triple H, and that's when I really started using a lot of drugs, which is why I fell for the Bret Hart trick so many times, because I was not in my right mind. First of all, I was irrational and out there. I was using a lot of drugs, a lot of painkillers. Anyway, it literally got to the point where I told one day at TV, I think it was, I told Vince McMahon, as he stood there talking to me with Jerry Briscoe standing next to him, which was interesting. I told Vince, if you're not going to use me better than this, just send me home. I thought that was a good idea, to tell him that. So what ended up happening in the end is they came back, and from time to time we would have these meetings. It was me, Vince, and Jerry Briscoe. I think he had Briscoe there to protect him, like he was worried I was going to go off or something. I don't know. And what ended up happening is Vince came back one day and he said at TV, he said, we would like to send you to Memphis to develop as a heel, and we're going to pay you $1,000 a week. And I thought that sounded like a good idea. And I said, I just need it in writing. That's what I said to Vince. I just need it in writing. Soon after that, we had like a TV taping in Vancouver. We had a pay-per-view, and then we did Vancouver TVs or something.
Oh, was that the International Incident pay-per-view?
It might have been. Yeah. It might have been. And that was the day I went home. And Jerry Briscoe by himself came up to me in the locker room and said, Vince said you can go ahead on home. And like I said, I was whacked out of my head on pills and stuff. I didn't even think to say, can I hear it from him? Because, you know, thinking about it later, I thought maybe that company, let me say this, the World Wrestling Federation at that time it ran in large part on plausible deniability.
Yeah.
One guy supposedly didn't know what another guy was saying for people to do. And they always said, they said do this, they. One day Vince even said, who the hell is they? But it was always set up in such a way where somebody could tell you something, and if you ended up questioning it, like sometimes you could go to Vince and say, they told me that I was supposed to do it this way, or wrestle the match, or do this finish, and Vince would have, I've heard Vince go, I never said that. Plausible deniability. So that made me wonder when Jerry Briscoe came up and told me I could go ahead on home. I remember I called Brett, because he was home, because this was after WrestleMania 12. And you could tell Sean was kind of taking over that position of, so I was probably expendable anyway. And yeah, Briscoe told me I could go ahead on home. So that afternoon, me and Austin went back to the hotel, and he finished shaving my head the rest of the way. And I think I was still there for another day after that, just laying by the pool getting drunk. And then I flew home, and that was it.
And what did you do during your time off at that point? Did you work a regular job or anything?
I started bouncing in a strip club and doing a lot of drugs, a lot more drugs. I just kind of, the strange thing, oftentimes people will ask questions about the wrestling business. And one of the big questions you get is, why do so many wrestlers die? Or why do so many wrestlers become drug addicts? When you leave a job, such as being a professional wrestler, where you walk out through curtains every night of the week to cheering or screaming fans, and you build up this character, and to a certain extent people kind of idolize you, some more, some less, and you leave that abruptly, that can do something to your head. I found it to be the case, because that's when I went off the deep end and started doing a lot of drugs. And that's kind of what happened. I was working in the strip clubs and getting messed up all the time and not saving any money and not really working out for a while and not wrestling anywhere.
So what made you want to get your WCW tryouts and WWE tryouts? What point did something switch in your head?
Well, I started working out again, and I guess the drug use was manageable to the point where I could work out again. Of course, I also started doing steroids at that point, and I was getting big, but I wanted to give it one more shot, and I did. I got those tryouts with both companies kind of back to back. Yeah, I thought I wanted to be. I had no business trying to come back though, because I was still really messed up. I don't think I could have managed living on the road with the road schedule that they were on, with the amount of drugs I was doing. So, and another thing, if I had been there when they quit drug testing, I'd probably been one of the first guys that died, because that's how crazy I was.
Who was your contact in WCW?
J.J. Dillon. It turned out to be J.J. Dillon. And Bret Hart was there. This was after the screw job thing. So, you know, I would still talk to Bret from time to time, and he always said he could get me booked, but he never did. But, well, I was kind of always too proud to ask somebody to get me booked, too, anyway. But with WCW, what I had done was I just showed up at a TV taping one day. And it was interesting because I was wearing a suit, and I just showed up. It was like in Tampa, Florida. They were doing Nitro. And I had moved up to Orlando to kind of pursue wrestling for WCW, because they were doing the thing out of Disney or Epcot or whatever it was. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Universal.
Universal, yeah.
And I just showed up at this Nitro just on my own and walked in the back, you know, wearing a suit. Nobody questioned me. And it was interesting that a lot of the people, a lot of the boys came up and were really nice and gracious to me and shaking hands and, hey, how you doing? Barbarian and came up, and he was real nice. And Kevin Nash came up, was real nice that first night. Scott Hall came up, hey man, Big Show, he was the Giant then. He came up, I'd never met him before. He's like, hey, I liked your match with our mutual friend. He was talking about Triple H, you know, and these people were coming up and making conversation. Well, it turned out that they were being nice to me because they thought somebody had brought me in. But nobody had brought me in, I just showed up. And J.J. Dillon came flying up and he came up to me and was talking to me and gave me his card. He said, I want you to call me at the office next week, and we're going to see what we can do, and yada, yada, yada. But then, like, the next couple days of TV, I showed up, and everything changed. I think they realized nobody brought him in. So everybody wasn't so nice anymore. You know, I found that to be very interesting. That was kind of a statement on how the politics behind the scenes work. People are nice to you when they think that maybe somebody brought you in and maybe you're going to get a push. But then when they realize, no, that wasn't the case, then they just switch.
Your surprise appearance at Nitro, then you came back. Was that after talking to JJ?
Yeah, it was after talking to JJ, but I showed up at, I don't remember what it was, what kind of taping it was. It was one of the other shows. I don't think they had Thunder at the time. At first I thought it was Thunder, but somebody corrected me on that.
Worldwide, maybe. They taped Worldwide.
I think maybe it was something like that, Worldwide. And
was it in Orlando?
well, it was in Central Florida. I think it was like Lakeland, Florida. Actually,
okay.
This one was in Lakeland, and I just remember that
Could have been WCW Saturday Night, maybe.
it might have been. But the Giant, Big Show, he acted like he didn't even know who I was the second time. I thought that was funny as shit, actually. But, you know, that's kind of the nature of the beast, man. That's how people are. You know, there's a lot of arrogance and whatever in the business, and that was fine. But yeah, eventually I got through calling and talking to J.J. Dillon. I got that tryout match that apparently somebody found on the internet. But yeah.
You also said at one point you talked to Kevin Sullivan about idea. He told you to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, this was early on. As a matter of fact, I think before they brought me for a tryout, JJ sent me to talk to Kevin Sullivan, and it was at maybe the Universal thing. They did the Universal tapings. And I
Those
went
were the
in.
worldwide tapings, just for anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where they did the worldwide.
Yeah.
So it was at that taping where it was a totally different set of people. You didn't see a lot of the Nitro guys on that worldwide taping at Universal, but I sat down at one point with Kevin Sullivan and kind of hashed out some ideas. You know, he wanted to see what I was thinking. And one thing I told him was I could still wrestle in some kind of semblance of the garbage man gimmick because that was mine. That was my intellectual property. It just couldn't be Duke the Dumpster. The rest of it was mine. And he didn't really like that. So the second idea I had was, and it was not my original idea, I'll say that, it was the old Macho Man gimmick where you come in, and I was going to come in as like a free agent and have different managers or maybe different factions or like the NWO or somebody, all these people looking at me and wanting to hire me for my services as a wrestler, doing that whole Macho Man free agent gimmick. And he sat back and he says, now that idea I like. And it was interesting. We talked about a few more things, and I ended up leaving. And then very shortly after that, I saw on I don't remember which TV show it was. It might have been Nitro, but it was when they brought Kurt Hennig back. And he came out, and one of the first things he said, I think it was Mean Gene Okerlund, interviewing him as he walked to the ring, he said, I'm a free agent, and yada, yada, yada. And I was just like, wow, you know. And I know it wasn't my original idea, but it's just interesting that they kind of went with that with somebody else. So at least I had good ideas, or the way I was thinking was good. And that happened in the World Wrestling Federation too, actually. At one point, before I ended up leaving, Stone Cold Steve Austin and I were riding together, and we were talking about ideas. And we had an idea to create a faction of kind of like skinhead dudes. And we went in and talked to Vince at TV about it and pitched the idea. And what we did is, see, he brought me in with him.
Right.
See, it was Steve's meeting, and he wanted me to come in with him. And I went and sat down, and I just remember telling Steve beforehand, I said, if he don't like these ideas or whatever, just you go ahead and do your thing, and that's cool, because I could already sense that I was on my way out anyway. But we went in and we pitched this idea to Vince. It was a skinhead gimmick. He would be like the mastermind, and I would be one of his henchmen, and we would it would not be racially based, but we just happened to jump other groups of people, like African American group, Hispanic group, or whoever. And we were naming off all these groups. And the way I described our skinhead group to Vince, and these are the exact words I used, I said it would be a Generation X type gimmick. Okay? And of course, the fact that I was sitting in there, Vince didn't like it anyway. He didn't like me being in there. So he didn't really respond well to it. And I ended up leaving, and I ended up leaving the company. But I just found it interesting that, you know, later on they had all these factions during the Attitude Era, and one of them was called D-Generation X.
And you said there was something that happened at the bar after your WCW tryout that Eric Bischoff happened to be in the bar for.
Oh yeah, it was a buddy of mine was with me, and I had my tryout match, and I guess I was done pretty early, and I ended up leaving, and we got to the bar kind of earlier than everybody, so it seemed, and we were there just kind of drinking some drinks and talking and shooting the shit. And slowly the boys started coming in one by one, and then the bar filled up. But what turned out to be the case is, looked across the bar, and the whole time, even before we got there, Eric Bischoff had got there. He was already there. He was sitting there with a hat on, turned around backwards. And he was, I guess, I don't know if they were wrestling fans or who they were. It was two women that were standing next to him talking to him. And he was just sitting over there in the dark, drinking drinks and talking to them the whole time we were there. And I didn't even know he was there. And my buddy was like, yeah, he's been there the whole time. You didn't know he was there. So it seemed like I kind of kayfabed him. I didn't even go over and introduce myself or nothing, you know. But yeah, he had been sitting there the whole time, and I just remember thinking, shit, why didn't you tell me he was sitting over there?
You got a tryout as a Raw announcer at one point. Was that around this time too?
They would always say things to me like, we're trying to figure out what to do with you. Because in the back, let's say it this way. I was over with the boys in the back. I was always cutting up and doing funny stuff in the back. And I was impersonating other wrestlers, goofing off, whatever. And I think at some point, I think Scott Hall told Vince at some point that I was really funny. But also, at one point, I walked in, we were at Madison Square Garden, and Vince was talking over a match with somebody, and I walked in and said something to Vince, and he just looked at me, and he almost kind of yelled at me, like, what are you doing here? And I looked at him, and I acted, I did Davey Boy's. You know, Davey was always infamous for getting in trouble, and he would always say, it wasn't me, I wasn't even fucking there. And I did that to Vince, and he freaking laughed so hard. And shortly thereafter, I got this call from Ann Russo saying, we need you to come up to the studio for something. They didn't tell me what it was. So they flew me up there, still not telling me what it was, took me to the studio. And as I got there, they told me, okay, we're going to try you out for a commentary spot on Raw. Now, again, I said many times I was clueless in a lot of ways. I didn't know the difference between color and straight commentary. I didn't. And as I went in, it turned out I was doing this tryout for the Raw commentary spot with Vince McMahon. He was in the studio. So I sat down next to Vince, and we started calling a Raw that was on tape, and I started calling the match. I started calling the moves, which is straight commentary. They wanted me to do color, and at that point I didn't know the difference, and it just went horribly. You could tell Vince was like, oh, this is not a good idea, it's not going to work. He didn't say that, but you could tell that's what he was thinking. So yeah, I kind of blew that opportunity just because I didn't know what I was getting into.
And what brought you over to Germany?
During the time I was trying to get on with WCW, and I was living in Orlando, I remember Brett talking to me and saying that his brother was talking to Otto, big Otto Vons in Germany and Austria, and they were looking, Otto always liked to have big guys work for him, big American wrestlers. And so Ross Hart set it up for me to go wrestle over in Austria and Germany. That season, it was 97, I believe. And I went over and wrestled over there for Otto that whole 6 months, I think maybe it was. But yeah.
Now, Sid told me in his shoot interview, this part hasn't been released yet, but he said the BO of people in Germany was bad, but it was even worse in Austria. Without insulting them, is there any truth to what he said there?
I think like anywhere else, certain people, that's the case. Certain people have BOs, certain people don't. Sometimes you find situations with wrestling fans, and it's not just in Germany or Austria, it's anywhere, where they will stand outside for freaking hours or even days on end waiting to see their favorite wrestler, get an autograph or a picture with their favorite wrestler, and they're just standing outside, not showering for days on end. And sometimes that's the case, but I don't know specifically. And like you said, I don't want to insult nobody, but yeah, sometimes it's just.
I think Sid's just a very honest person.
Yeah.
And you knew David Finlay over in Europe. Any stories about him? I think you mentioned he was considered the policeman of the territory.
Well, I think he was, maybe earlier in his career, he was, I think people used to call him the police or the policeman of a territory, where if a promoter wanted somebody gone, they would have this particular person they would put him in a match with a person like Finlay, and they would stretch him, basically. And the story that I heard, and it was confirmed by Finley, and when I saw him and met him in Germany, actually, in Austria, when the first time Finley was working with WCW, I think it was the time he like busted, what was his name? Steve Regal. He busted him wide open on live TV or something. It was during that first run. Anyway, there was a local guy down in Florida. I think his name was Steve Collins. Steve the Party Animal Collins. He was friends with Kevin Sullivan. And the way I hear it is, and I don't know if this is true, but he was kind of bugging Kevin, trying to get hired in WCW. And he had a tryout or here or there or something. But Kevin, I don't know if he didn't think he was good enough or he didn't want to give him a job, ended up having Finley wrestle this guy, Steve. And I asked Finley about it, and he remembered it vividly. Sullivan asked him to, and he ended up, I think he slapped this guy so hard that he blew his eardrum out. And I never saw the guy wrestle anywhere again, not just WCW. I never saw him locally in Florida anymore. I think that kind of broke his spirit for the business. But yeah, sometimes in territories you would have a guy that kind of did that. Now in Germany, Finley was great. He was a nice guy. I saw him kind of rough up a fan one night because there was, where we wrestled in Hanover, Germany, there was a bar it was like a big tent. There was a bar where they served beer all night long while the people were watching the wrestling show. And this one night, this drunk guy was just talking all this shit about he could beat any of the wrestlers and this and that and kick everybody's ass. And the promoter, Peter William, that night, the promoter put this guy in the ring with Finley, and Finley just stretched him from corner to corner, post to post, just stretched this guy. I mean, he didn't beat on him or nothing, but that guy knew he was in a fight. It was funny as hell, actually. But other than that, Finley was a great guy. He was always good to me. Always had great advice. I actually got in the ring with him during the daytime to learn stuff. You know, before we wrestled at night, I would, as much as I could, I would try to learn from him. So.
And I guess JBL and Bob Holly had kind of those policeman jobs in WWE at one time or another.
That's what I heard. I mean, I was long gone, but
yeah.
It was interesting because JBL was meek and mild-mannered when I was there. He was Justin Hawk Bradshaw, and he didn't really talk to anybody. He didn't get into anybody's business. You didn't see him out at bars very much at all, if any. Bob Holly was never a big partier. He never caused any big problems when I was there. But, you know, they were there a lot longer. After I left, they were there a lot longer and their positions changed, so maybe that was the case. But I don't know, man. People talk about bullies in the business and stuff, and I think maybe some of that was going on too.
And I guess you wrestled Robbie Brookside over there too, who now has a position with NXT.
Yes, Robbie was awesome. Awesome wrestler, a character, for sure. Had fun wrestling him. He would always lace me right in the back. Boom! He would kick me so hard. He would snapmare me over, and he would kick me as hard as he could right in the back between the shoulder blades, and then he would run off to the other side of the ring laughing. Great wrestler, though, and he deserves that spot with NXT and working with WWE in general. He was always a great wrestler.
And the last time wrestling fans really saw you before now, where they're going to see a lot of videos of you, it was WrestleMania 17 when you were part of the Gimmick Battle Royal. Any thoughts on that, and who called you about that?
Well, they didn't call me. I called them. Again, I was down in Florida, and I was working with an independent promotion. It was Sunshine Wrestling Federation, and at some point they changed their name to FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, before, I guess, it became a developmental territory. These were different promoters. Anyway, I was working for them. I was severely addicted to drugs. doing a lot of drugs, a lot of painkillers, a lot of cocaine. I was doing drugs to the point where I had to go to a methadone clinic. And the reason I bring that up is WrestleMania 17, I called Bruce Pritchard. Of course, he acted like they had been looking for me. Where you been? And they brought me up for that. And if you look, I was really skinny and white and gaunt. You could tell I wasn't in good shape. And one of the guys at the methadone clinic was a wrestling fan, so he gave me like 3 days worth of methadone to take with me. Otherwise, I couldn't have made it because, you know, that's how bad off I was. And I was strung out when I did the gimmick battle royal. Thank God I didn't have to like do any spots or run around. All I had to do was kind of punch and kick and then get. And of course, Doink, Ray Apollo clotheslined me like on the wrong side, so I had to double hook and I like twisted both my shoulders. But yeah, I was in bad shape during that gimmick battle royal, man. It was on methadone and whatever else. It was a decent payday though, and hey, it was WrestleMania. I just don't remember. Mean Gene Okerlund and Bobby the Brain Heenan were awesome. Great individuals. I just remember that. They were so nice. They were really cool with me.
Did you have any other interactions there with people you hadn't seen for a while?
Yeah, Steve had changed. Austin, he was the main guy now, and The Rock. That was the one where they wrestled each other, wasn't it? I think so. That was the first one they wrestled each other, and that was a good match. But no, I didn't see either of them much. Steve really didn't talk much. I didn't see him much. Didn't talk to Taker much. You know, I didn't talk to anybody much. I was there just for the payoff, because I really didn't want to see many people. I kind of hid off in a corner. I kept my head buried in the sand and didn't interact with a lot of people. Didn't go to the bar afterwards, huh?
Did Vince say anything to you?
Just, hey, how you doing, kind of thing, and Shane did too, but, you know, I just wasn't in good shape, so I really didn't want to talk to people very much.
And I guess you had a match with Typhoon that was one of your low points too.
Yeah, that was down in Florida. That was for FOW, Future of Wrestling, with Bobby Rogers. We did a match at some local place. That was another situation. It was my ring. During that time, I was using a lot of drugs. I had the ring, set it up, and tore it down myself. Most of the time, I had a few guys helping me, but that was one of those matches where, looking back on it now and seeing it on tape, I just remember what kind of shape I was in, and it wasn't very good.
And obviously, you've just kind of appeared in recent months, I guess, and you apparently have had an issue with one of your legs. Could you tell us everything that happened with that?
Well, after the drug problem initially from wrestling, I moved up to Tennessee and went to rehab for the first time in 2003, got clean, and went about 7 years. Went back to college, became a school teacher and a coach and all these things. And, I still had a lot of old wrestling injuries. What happened in about 2009, I started working out again, and I pushed it too hard, and I had a foot injury. I had twisted my ankle a bunch of times wrestling in the WWF. Against Triple H, I twisted it because I used to wear these high-tech magnums. Anyway, I had this foot injury, and during 2009 when I started working out again, I was trying to squat all this crazy weight and do all these stupid things, plyometric jump training and all that shit. And the foot collapsed. The bone structure just disintegrated, and the foot collapsed, and I just ignored it, and I started taking painkillers again. That's when I relapsed, and I was more worried about getting pills than going to get my foot fixed, okay? And then what happened is I went and had the surgery, and they tried to fix it the first time, and I didn't follow doctor's orders. I was up walking on it the very next day, and I mean, it was full of metal and, screws and everything. to hold it together, and I just jumped up and started running around on it because I was running around finding more drugs because I was fully back into it, taking the pills, and it fell apart. And I think I kind of hobbled around. I remember seeing Marty Jannetty's foot in an interview where it was turned to the side. That's how my foot, it was turned to the side like that for like almost 2 more years after that. And I went and tried to get it fixed again by another doctor. And I was following directions this time much better. But what ended up happening is deep inside of it, I got a staph infection. And it kind of ate up all the rest of the bone and stuff in the foot. By the time I realized it, it felt like my foot was kind of falling off from the inside. So I had to rush back to the hospital. They pumped me full of antibiotics for about 2 weeks straight. And the options were, you could try to, he would try to clean it up and fuse it all up, but there's no guarantee. And remember, I'm on a bunch of drugs here. And he said to me, if you want to be out of pain, the quickest way, if we took the foot and got you a good prosthetic, you would be out of pain sooner. Now, that sounded appealing to me because I had been in so much pain for the 2 years prior to that. Walking around on a foot full of metal and shards of metal and bone and turned to the side. And I decided to have them amputate my foot. It wasn't as easy as they made it sound with the prosthetic. But it's going well now. So, but yeah, it was just crazy. I was more concerned with getting messed up than taking care of my foot. So I ended up losing it.
And you were telling me after that you ended up ballooning up to 400 pounds.
Yeah, because at that same time, after the foot was amputated, during that time, as I said, I was running around finding drugs a lot. And part of that, you become part of this subculture in the street where you're buying and selling pills to get what you want. And I was getting certain pills from the doctor that weren't strong enough for me. So I would sell them to the people I knew. You know, I had drug dealers and people, and I sold some pills to get money to get the pills that I wanted. Because at that point, I had graduated to shooting morphine. I was an IV drug user. So I ended up in one of those situations where a guy that formerly had been a dealer for me ended up setting me up. And set me up on 2 occasions for selling like 4 or 5 pills each time. It ended up being 2 counts of delivery of Schedule 2, which was Oxycontin, and 1 count of delivery of Schedule 3, which was Suboxone. And they held on to the indictment because during that time was when I had the foot amputated. And after the foot was taken, about a month after that is when they came and arrested me. So the teaching job was gone, the coaching jobs were gone, all that stuff. I had lost everything. Anyway, part of my plea deal in that whole thing, I entered the drug court program and did a 1.5 years in drug court. During the drug court time, yes, I blew up huge, almost.
What is drug court?
Well, drug court is a program where you take people with drug-related charges. You know, it could be drug charges, it could be theft charges where they were stealing to get money for drugs. People with drug addictions or substance abuse problems. And you bring them out of jail. Instead of serving jail or prison time, we bring them out and we have this super strict probation supervision and treatment at the same time. So we like put GPS on them, we watch every move they make for a while, and that was the program I was part of after I got busted. And I went through and I successfully completed it. It was a 1.5 year program, and yes, I blew up to 400 pounds. Instead of doing drugs, I was just eating a lot of food. And I was huge, I was morbidly obese, smoking cigarettes, all these terrible habits. And towards the end of the time I was in drug court, I made a decision to change everything and get in shape, quit eating eating all the junk, quit smoking, get healthy. And I did. And then after I graduated, they hired me to work for the drug court, which is where I work now.
What advice would you have for people that are battling addiction?
Get help. Don't try to fight it on your own because it's a losing battle. You got to get help. You got to ask for help. You have to suck up your pride and you got to ask for help.
So you didn't have to go through the WWE sponsored rehab then?
You know, it's interesting. They started sending those letters out while I was addicted, before I got busted. But I was always too proud. Well, I wasn't ready, first of all. And I was too proud to ask the WWE for help. I was too proud to let them know what my situation was. Then, of course, I got busted and everybody knew what my situation was.
Right.
I was facing between 6 and 12 years in prison. And, you know, I always tell people that are battling addiction, it's got to get painful enough before you're going to change. That moment when they came and arrested me, sitting there with one leg, with my mom crying next to me, that was the moment. I knew that was it. And I had to do whatever it took to never use drugs again. So, and that's what I do every day. And it's very helpful that I'm working in this job now because that keeps me clean too, helping other people that are going through it.
And it's good because it will be hard. It's probably hard to find a job with
Felonies, yeah.
We are live here with former WWE Superstar Duke, the Dumpster, Droese, who is making an on-camera appearance for the first time probably since the 2000 or WrestleMania 17 Gimmick Battle Royal. He will take some fan questions here, but one of the email questions I had from a fan was any memories of working Bobby Wales at Carver Theater in Miami?
Bobby Wales is the guy that trained me, the Jamaican Jammer Bobby Wales, and at a certain time he was running shows in this little venue in the middle of Carroll City, Florida, down in Miami, the Carver Theater. I only worked there once or twice, but he actually used to bring in guys like Kevin Sullivan to work there and stuff. But yeah, Bobby's the guy that broke me into the business, and all those people that worked with Bobby and the different local promoters down there, those are the guys I came up with and learned how to wrestle with. So I owe my wrestling career and my wrestling ability to Bobby Wales. He trained me.
And what are your memories of being the Warren County High School strength and conditioning coach?
I love doing that. I love working out. I loved helping other people learn how to train and take care of their bodies. All the way back to when I was in the World Wrestling Federation, I used to train with Bob Holly at the gym. We would train like 2.5 hours a day, man. He was insane. But the things I learned from him and Barbarian and other people like them in the weight room, those are the ideals that I brought when I was a strength and conditioning coach in Warren County. But yeah, I used to love that job. I used to love training guys.
Did you ever feel stereotyped by WWE when you were the Dumpster?
I think in their eyes it was very limited, and because of that, it was an afterthought. I, as a wrestler and as a character, was an afterthought a lot of the time in their eyes. They didn't have much for me. As I said before, they always would say things like, "We're just trying to figure out what to do with you." That always aggravated me, but I did feel limited, absolutely.
What was your favorite WWE match?
Well, wrestling Triple H was awesome. You know, that was a pay-per-view match. And he was always easy to work with. But WrestleMania 17, even though it was just that gimmick battle royal, and that friggin' Astrodome was 60-some thousand people, that was crazy. Never been in front of that many people before or since, and that was great. But then one other guy I used to really love was Henry Godwinn. I actually only wrestled him once or twice, but he was always fun to wrestle.
Someone from Ireland says hi to you, and another guy, you've already told a bunch of road stories in this shoot interview. But they're asking what's your best WWE road stories. Is there any that you're missing that you didn't tell here?
God, I'm sure there is, and I just can't think of them. But let me think. What did I not tell?
Well, while you're thinking about it, memories of being on the King's Court.
That had the potential to be a great feud, and it could have gone at least to a pay-per-view, but I just think that the state of the company at that time, the original PG era, or as I call it, the rated G era, they were so worried about sponsors and doing anything too violent that it just got squashed when we did that whole can deal. That just killed it. I can't think of any other road stories.
Anything involving Nash?
Which one with Nash? I know one time we, Kevin Nash, we were in, God, where were we? It was somewhere overseas. And the boys were just, collectively, all the wrestlers were just kind of cracking. We were losing it because of the road schedules. They were so rough. And the unofficial word had come down that on this trip it was going to be okay to smoke some weed. They called it spring break. They broke away from there was not going to be, they couldn't say this officially, but there was not going to be any drug tests on this tour, and there wasn't. And I just remember sitting in a room with the Clique, and I strangely ended up in a room with the Clique smoking weed, and Kevin Nash said the strangest thing. He was like, and nobody better fucking tell that we're doing this or something. He was saying something to that effect. And I just remember, and other people were looking at me, and I was like, who are you talking to? And I was just wondering why the hell he was saying that. But I don't know, maybe he was he felt the need to make sure that I wasn't going to say something. I don't know.
Any memories of the 1996 Royal Rumble? You talked about the 95 Rumble incident already.
96, I'm sure Sean won that too. He probably won 95 and 96, right? Yeah. I remember grabbing Sean immediately. I always grabbed him and took him to a corner and told him to rest. And I always tried to stay close to him because I knew he was winning it. And I knew I would get more TV time. I always found a way to be around the Clique during hard camera time. And with Sean in the Rumbles, I would grab him early on, at least while I was in the ring. Of course, then he went off and did his other things after I was gone. But yeah, that's pretty much all I remember about that Rumble. The 96, wasn't that the one with the free-for-all before it? And I came in 30th, maybe?
Yeah, that was probably it.
Yeah.
The fans will probably look it up anyways.
Of course.
And were you there for that Clique incident with Carl Ouellet where him and Nash got into it in the ring?
I was not in that. I was not on that show in Canada, but I remember them coming back and talking about it, and they were seething with anger and talking a bunch of shit about Carl, and they couldn't believe he had the audacity to do that, and he had no right, and he had to have respect for the champion and all this stuff, and it was just a big mess.
Would you accept an induction into the WWE Hall of Fame?
Yeah, but it's a long shot, man. I don't think there's any way, unless they do a gimmick wing to the Hall of Fame. I would. I mean, who is it that said they won't? Honky Tonk or something said he wouldn't take it? I would. I don't think that'll ever happen. I was there for 2.5 years.
Now, you alluded to this in the full shoot, but a fan's asking you if you think you could have succeeded as a heel.
Yes, absolutely. I know I could have. They just never pulled the trigger on it. Now, that reminds me of a story I didn't talk about. They were going to turn me heel at one point and make Ted DiBiase my manager. They were going to do a gimmick where I was his protege, and they actually started it. They did a magazine article where I was dressed up in a suit doing a photo shoot, and they had me start finding money in the garbage can after wrestling matches on TV, and they were working in that direction, and then I think that's when Ted left. I went to WCW, so that kind of killed that whole idea. But yeah, that was one story I didn't talk about in the shoot. They were going to turn me heel and put me with DiBiase.
Do you have any memories of the Kuwait tour and your match with the British Bulldog?
Davey's always fun to work. He's funny, that's for sure. But the thing that I remember about Kuwait is a rib. It wasn't me wrestling Davey, it was in the locker room. And what happened was me and Davey were sitting next to each other in the locker room. And he pointed out the fact that the Portuguese man of war's mask was on the table, sitting there right in front of us. And I don't know where PJ was, just incredible. I don't know where he was. And what I did, and I'm telling on myself now, I moved a little fruit basket that they had in the back in Kuwait, and I just put it over the top of his mask. Harmless enough, right? The problem is I forgot about it. And PJ didn't fucking sell it either. So he just figured whoever did it was going to have it the next day to give back to him. Well, what ended up fucking happening is whoever the cleaning people were that came in and cleaned the locker room, they must have found it and took it home. And, you know, who knows what happened, but it was gone. We got back the next day and it was gone. And fucking Davey goes and tells Shawn Michaels that I did it. So then Bret Hart comes up to me and tells me Shawn Michaels is talking shit about me. So I sit down next to Shawn and ask him if we're going to have a fucking problem, because I felt cornered and embarrassed that it happened, and I felt like I had to try and save face, but it was a big fucked up situation. And I felt horrible that it happened to somebody's gimmick, you know. I didn't mean for that to happen, but all I did is I moved this basket over the top of it, and I totally forgot about it. And it was Davey that gave me the idea. He pointed it out.
What did he wear on his face for the mask?
I don't think he wrestled the next night, or I think we were almost done. I don't know, but he didn't wrestle because I don't think he wrestled. I felt horrible.
I don't know if this is an inside joke, but what are your thoughts on baked beans being part of an English breakfast?
That's not an inside joke. I don't know. Baked beans for breakfast is kind of nasty.
Were you friends with Ahmed Johnson?
No, I was not friends with Ahmed Johnson. Matter of fact, we almost got in a fight in Germany because he was cracked on the bus. He lost his shit. And I don't know. He didn't like us playing rock and roll and country music. And I don't know, he said something about that fucking redneck music. Bullshit. And so I took it personally. So I sent the promoter up to the front of the bus to put a videotape in of the movie Mississippi Burning. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it opens up with a burning cross. It was a pretty heelish fucking move. And he fucking lost it. When we got on the bus later on, he charged at me like he wanted to fight me. And his face was like in my chest, and he said, do something. And I just kind of stood there, and I told him he was a piece of shit. He can go fuck himself. But he wanted to kill me because I had pushed him over the edge, I guess. But you know, I did things like that. If you fucked with me, I'd give it back to you 1,000 times worse.
Who was your favorite person to travel with on the road, and any story about them on the road?
Savio was a blast. Steve Austin was a blast. You know, Steve Austin with the infamous foam cooler. We would go to like whatever, Circle K or whatever the freaking store was, and get a foam cooler, a bag of ice, and a 12-pack of natural light beer every night after the show. If we had to drive to the next town, that's what we did. Savio was always hilarious. I remember just laughing our asses off listening to Jerky Boys cassette tapes, the crank collar guys. That shit was funny as hell. But yeah, Savio was a great guy too. Those two were my favorites.
What is your opinion on the Chris Benoit conspiracy theories?
I don't know. I don't think there was anything like that. I think he just He did it, and he killed himself. That's all I think. I don't believe there's any conspiracy.
At what point did you stop watching wrestling?
I stopped watching wrestling. Wow, somebody knows me on there, because I said this somewhere. I stopped watching wrestling on the day that Triple H crawled into a casket and acted like he was fucking a corpse. That was the day I stopped watching wrestling.
Do you have any stories about Sunny, and did you get added to her list?
No. I steered clear of Sonny. Chris Candido was a great dude. I do remember the incident where somebody shit in her food in Germany, though. I think it was Germany. We had the catered food. Yeah, somebody did. They shit in a tray, and they took hers and put it over top of it. So you know that she had to have dug into it. But, yeah. I mean, that's the only thing. All that Shawn Michaels stuff, well, it was rumored, but it wasn't so...
Someone
blatant.
says, I guess it was X-Pac that's admitted to it since.
Yeah. Did he do Sonny's or did he do Sable's? He probably did both. Like he shit in everybody's food.
I didn't even know Sable had that done to her.
I thought
too.
Sable did, and they lost their shit about it. Lost their shit. That's a pun. Her and Mero got lost. I don't know. Maybe I heard that wrong somewhere, but I do remember the Sonny thing. I was there. Yeah, it was. It was X-Pac. It was.
Someone asks what your favorite movie, color, and food is.
Golly, man, there's a lot of movies, but Pulp Fiction's up there. Pulp Fiction, favorite color is blue, and favorite food is pizza.
And someone's asking your impressions of Vince Russo.
Vince Russo, interestingly enough, was the one that was pushing really hard for me to turn heel and go with DiBiase. He wrote this whole fucking backstory in the magazine that was incredible. And he was the one that was really kind of spearheading that thing. He was just the editor of the magazine then. But you could tell he had good ideas. Now, I don't think he was responsible for the resurgence of the World Wrestling Federation, like during the Attitude Era. He was part of it, but I don't think he was as important as people maybe thought in the beginning, and I think he was kind of exposed in WCW. I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that his ideas had to bounce off of Vince before they were approved. But in WCW, we saw the result of what his ideas were. But I never had a problem with Vince Russo. He was a quiet guy behind the scenes, the editor of the magazine. But yeah, he really was, you could tell he was really pushing character development, not just for me, but for other people. And I think that's eventually why he got put in that position, because he had such a creative mind with developing characters. Sometimes it went crazy and overboard maybe later on, but he really tried to push for my heel turn. He really did.
Did you ever witness Wrestler's Court?
No, they never did that when I was there.
Were you there the night that Shawn Michaels got beat up by the Harris twins, but he wasn't beat up? I think he was just threatened.
No, I wasn't there for that either. I heard about it, but no.
And apparently, yes, there was an X-Pac incident with Sable and shitting in the bag. Do you have a favorite Rocky movie?
4, with Drago.
And final question before I shut this down. What is your opinion on Missy Hyatt? Someone's asking.
I don't know Missy. I've heard a lot of things, but in the wrestling business, you can hear a lot of things, and a lot of them aren't true. I speak from experience. But no, I've never met Missy Hyatt. I don't know her.
Well, the fans say thank you, and thank you for doing that with us.
No problem. Thank you.
So where can people follow you on social media? You're very active on Facebook, I know that.
Yeah, just Mike Droese on Facebook. Now I've got a Twitter. It's Droese Mike at Droese Mike. So I guess there was already Mike Droese taken, probably. That's Twitter. And Instagram is just Mike Droese as well.
And if people want your autograph, is there anywhere they can contact you to send it? Do you do that?
I haven't yet because I really don't have any. I'm so new to getting back into this whole thing. I'm working on it, but they can contact me through Facebook. I very actively talk to fans on Facebook. They can message me and we can talk about it.
Do you watch MMA?
I did until they got really expensive, and then I just waited for it to come on a replay, a cheaper version on another channel.
Prediction for Brock Lesnar's return against Daniel Cormier?
I think Brock's a lot bigger than him, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Just, golly, I don't follow anything, but, golly. Brock, when he sets his mind to it and prepares himself, see, now he's experienced. That first go around, it was all new to him, you know. Now it's, he's the veteran. If he's prepared physically, you know, he'll probably beat the guy.
Well, he'll definitely be more prepared than CM Punk was for his fights, that's for sure.
Yeah. Bless his heart. I don't know CM Punk. I just, I guess MMA, it's not, people, it's fighting in general, boxing, MMA, any of that stuff is really difficult. Well, you're a kickboxer, aren't you?
Yeah.
Did that. You know, it's difficult. And you can't just jump into something like MMA. Man, you find out real quick if you've got what it takes or not. You'll find out real quick.
Any final thoughts to close this off?
Man, this has just been crazy. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, I disappeared for a long time because of all the craziness, and now the fans have really been nice to me, and I really do appreciate it. And I look forward to more interaction with the fans and more appearances and stuff like that. And this whole social media thing is crazy. So I appreciate all of it. I really do.
And can we get it? It's time to take out the trash.
It's time to take out the trash.